Chapter 658. 1 second to remember, 800 mail sign Xiao divided by TalkNet, wonderful pop-up window free reading. The picture kept changing, and soon it came to the Tianjiao battle that Su Buwang was also familiar with. Seeing the scene at the end of the divine awareness, Su Buwang finally understood why that person disappeared and then left Xingtian Shrine. The Lord of Xingtian Palace was a terrible hoax. He was not that person's biological father at all, but an enemy. It was White Demon who used his bloodline to suppress his clansmen. After being saved by Su Jojo, he finally understood everything. Bloodline awakening. The more Su Buwang watched, the more uncomfortable he felt. Compared with that person, what was the grievance he suffered? It turns out that I am not only the descendant of Holy Girl Su, but also the lineal descendant of Qingshui Palace. I deserve to be called. Su Buwang thought with self-mockery, and the memory picture in front of him gradually faded away. At this moment, Su Buwang only felt that his heart was extremely calm. The knot in his heart in the past was opened, and his thoughts were clear, which made him gradually fall into a strange state. All of a sudden, a piece of memory surfaced in his mind. Su Buwang was in a daze because the state was broken, and he murmured, "Whose memory is it?" It was a mountain top. If he remembered correctly, it was in Ni sect. In the picture, Ling Li sat cross-legged, with reincarnation mirror and black lotus ring in front of him. The dialogue between them was extremely clear. Achoo! The reincarnation beast sneezed as it lay on the ground. It immediately looked warily at Qian Mu, who was sitting with his legs crossed. "I have a bad premonition." "Did you cause trouble?" "Making trouble." Qian Mu looked helpless and spread his hands. "This reincarnation mirror is your territory. What can I do?" "At most, I can only go in and see the cultivation state of those young people." "You're right." The suspicion in the eyes of the reincarnation beast faded away, and it lay down again. Qian Mu smiled faintly, and suddenly sneezed. His expression was slightly stiff, and he scratched his head. "Did I overlook something?" Hemp Camp, Chimo region. In the hall that was full of piles of rubble, a bright black light penetrated through. The space stagnated for a moment, and then all the rubble that passed by turned into powder until it fell on the wall at the end of the hall, silently leaving a crack in the wall. In the darkness, she gently waved her fingertips, and the black light stopped. Then it flashed back and lingered on her fingertips like a black ring. The sword light flashed. The sword light was reflected in Su Li's eyes. The power of the divine ability was far beyond her expectation, and the amount of black lotus stones it absorbed was also far beyond her imagination. The black lotus stones around the camp had all been gathered in this palace in just a few days. Now in the wasteland outside the camp, it was rare to see black lotus stones. But even so, after absorbing all the black stones, she could only cultivate 3 supernatural powers. In disappointment, Su Li tested the supernatural power a little. She only released a little power, but it almost let the Black Lotus magic sword penetrate the palace and hurt innocent people. If I can forge a 12th grade divine sword, Su Li couldn't help but think about it, but she soon restrained her thoughts. Ma Ying was no longer able to collect a large number of Black Lotus stones in a short time. Now that her strength had greatly increased, she could run amok in the Chimo circle. It was time to explore the whereabouts of Su Bai and the divine thunder of the 5 elements. Thinking of this, Su Li waved her hand and turned all the gray-white gravel in the hall into stone powder, which was a gift from Ma Ying. After the energy in the gravel was absorbed, the hardness did not decrease but increased, and it had a certain viscosity. It was a good raw material for building city walls. After finishing this step, Su Li's figure disappeared like a bubble. When she reappeared, she was already high above the sky outside Zyma camp. She took a deep look at mine before turning around and flying off into the distance, disappearing into the horizon. 3 days later, when Li Hong came to clean up the rubble, he found that the building was empty. He hurriedly went to inform Mada. Mada was not surprised by this. He only chuckled with a hint of hope in his smile. Maybe the day that the Realm Lord is looking forward to will soon arrive. 2 days ago, Su Li stopped in front of the tall immortal hall with a calm look. Compared with Qing Shui's circle, Qimo's circle was much smaller. In just one day, she crossed more than half of Qimo's circle and came here. She sensed that the perfect chakra was close at hand, but it seemed to be far away. But here. Boom, the towering gate of the immortal hall opened suddenly. It was not the same as when Ma Jintian came here before, which only opened a little. Now, the gate was completely open. Then, the warriors of Qimo's circle, led by Bing Feng, came out in 2 rows, leaned against the gate, and saluted respectfully. "Welcome, Grand Elder Su." Bing Feng shouted first, and then everyone shouted in unison, which was as loud as thunder. "Welcome, Grand Elder Su." Su Li narrowed her eyes slightly and said nothing. Bing Feng approached and said with a smile, "Grand Elder Su, the Realm Lord has been waiting for a long time." "Senior Qi Tian, you are too polite." Su Li chuckled and walked into the gate with her hands behind her back. After a few flashes, she left Bing Feng behind and crossed a long distance into the hall. "Senior Qi Tian, please don't blame me for coming here rashly." Bing Feng glanced at the hall from afar and ordered everyone to close the gate. Next, the conversation between the 2 circles would be held. He wanted to ensure that such a communication would not be disturbed by any external things. Su Li, don't regard me as an outsider." Qi Tian waved his hand, and the dim hall was instantly brightened. Qi Tian, who was tall and had red hair, waved his hand and came down from the throne with a hearty smile. He looked slightly serious. "Mo controlled the natural law to take action, so I had to come back in advance." Su Li frowned, and Qi Tian said again, "However, with the help of the old ancestor of Tianqing Valley, you don't have to worry too much about the safety of NI sect. He asked me to tell you that you only have 1 year to improve wholeheartedly. After 1 year, it will be the final battle." Su Li raised her eyebrows slightly. Bai Xiu is so confident. There are a lot of secrets in Tianqing Valley. This time, he also put in all his effort. Qi Tian shook his head meaningfully. "As far as I know, those who used that kind of astrology didn't end well." Su Li frowned slightly, but soon relaxed. At this time, she already had the necessary awareness. If the war started, Bai Xiu would not be the only sacrifice. "Elder brother Qi Tian, you should know why I am here." Su Li got straight to the point. Qi Tian nodded and exclaimed, "You were so bold in the Battle of Ziyun House. But, you really succeeded." He waved his sleeves, "Follow me." As soon as he finished speaking, Su Li saw the throne split into 2 halves and moved to both sides. The entrance of a small world appeared. "This is..." Su Li's pupils shrank slightly. Qi Tian laughed, "I am at least in the Deshang realm. I was really bored for a long time, so I made this thing, which is equivalent to the evolution of the Junior Emperor field. The situation of the chakra realm is a little complicated, so I have to put it in there. So, I have to inconvenience you." Qi Tian looked apologetic. Su Li understood what he meant. If she entered this small world, her life would not be under her control. "It doesn't matter. I believe in elder brother Qi Tian." Su Li stepped into the small world without saying anything. Qi Tian's eyes were full of admiration, and he followed her closely. Behind the door, her eyes rippled like water for a moment, and finally became clear. What came into Su Li's eyes was not the pale space she imagined, but a beautiful valley. She couldn't help but be surprised. Chi Tian looked rough, but she didn't expect that his mind was so delicate. It was too boring, so I made some embellishments. You are the first guest here. Chi Tian came from behind, smiled, and pointed to the ice coffin erected in the valley, saying, "No, you are the second one." Su Li saw the frozen figure, and suddenly looked serious. She flashed to the ice coffin and whispered to herself, "Su Bai." At this moment, Su Bai's perfect face was full of hideous cracks, like a porcelain vase that was about to break. If it was not frozen, it was likely to be broken. He is in a strange state now. Blazing Heaven walked over and said in a solemn tone, by relying on the power of the perfect wheel, he was barely able to absorb the 5 elements divine lightning into his body. Moreover, because of the strike you endured, the 5 elements divine lightning showed signs of fusing into one. However, even though he is the spirit of divine lightning, the fused 5 elements divine lightning is still not something he can withstand. Chi Tian glanced at Su Li's side face when he said this. Fortunately, I found it in time and temporarily sealed him, so that he won't continue to destroy himself. If this happened to you, with your physical body, it is most likely that you will explode like fireworks, and your soul will fly away, and your bones will disappear. Su Li suddenly understood, and her heart was heavy. Thinking of Su Bai's strange behavior in the Battle of Ziyun House, she finally understood. He knew that she couldn't bear the merged 5 elements thunder, so he made his own decision. The spirit of the divine thunder was so stupid that it made people feel distressed. Is there any way to save him? Su Li turned around, no longer looking at Su Bai, and stared at Chi Tian with burning eyes. Chi Tian seemed to have expected Su Li's question, and smiled slightly. First of all, you have to understand what level the 5 elements thunder will become after it is merged. The thunder of tranquility. Su Li blurted out, and then added, my understanding of the thunder of tranquility is just on the surface. No wonder you are so bold. The ignorant are fearless, Chi Tian sighed. As the daughter of luck, I am afraid that only people like you can still be alive and kicking in the case of contact with the thunder of tranquility. The thunder of tranquility is a thunder method that can only be mastered by immortals, and its horror is even above the world-ending thunder. Chi Tian smiled. In other words, if you can master the thunder of tranquility, the natural law of Qingshui's circle can't do anything to you. Su Li's eyes flickered. Her hunch was right. Was the thunder of tranquility the key to the final battle? Her painstaking collection was not in vain. But you overestimate yourself and underestimate the thunder of tranquility. Chi Tian shook his head and warned, judging from your previous performances, your physical body seems to have exceeded the limit of the human clan and become a half-immortal. But it is far from enough to master the thunder of tranquility. You know, even among the immortals, there are very few people who can master the thunder of tranquility. Su Li was silent when she heard that. She was not affected by Chi Tian, but was thinking about a question, and soon asked it. Chapter 659. In 1 second, 800 mail signs small divided by TalkNet, wonderful pop-up window free reading. The space of the small world stagnated for a moment. Chi Tian smiled and said nothing. He looked at Su Li for a moment and said, are you doubting me? Su Li looked calm and smiled freely. If I don't ask, I'm afraid you will doubt whether I am real or not. Chi Tian was stunned and immediately laughed. That's right. If you don't ask, you are not Su Li. I do know a lot about immortals. As for the reason, it is what I will tell you next. Chi Tian waved his hand, and the portal of the small world reappeared. Come with me. You will understand everything when you see him. Su Li nodded and left the small world. She could not accept the infusion of the thunder of tranquility before her physical body improved further. Naturally, she could not save Su Bai for the time being. After leaving the small world, Chi-Tian took Su-Li all the way down from the ground, as if there was no end, and they moved forward without rest. Chi-Tian gradually stopped talking, and Su-Li did not say anything either. She faintly understood what Chi-Tian wanted to take her to see. If it was true, it meant that there was no way back for the Chimo Circle. 3 days and 3 nights later, the temperature in the passage had reached a terrifying level, and the nothingness was distorted, turning into ferocious faces, constantly twisting. The fiery red magma surged in the geocentric river, and it was so dazzling that people could not open their eyes. Su-Li seemed to be unaware of it and followed Chi-Tian. I was just suspicious before, but now I am sure that you have broken through the physical limit of the human clan. Otherwise, it is impossible for you to come here with me without using your practice method. In this way, my previous preparation is not in vain. Chi-Tian turned a corner, and suddenly it became clear, and the temperature dropped instantly. A huge azure ball of light came into Su-Li's eyes. It was floating and rotating slowly, and there were large black spots on its surface, occupying nearly half of the spherical area, like entangled moss, which was annoying. This is the core of a realm. Su-Li's eyes flashed. Although it is not perfect, it is very beautiful, so beautiful that it is intoxicating. Yes, I am also amazed when I see it for the first time. Chi-Tian walked closer to the boundary core. An icy aura seeped into his pores, but he didn't feel cold at all. A realm core is the mother of a realm, and it is the embodiment of rules. Its existence is above the so-called heavenly Tao. Only when a realm core exists can it give birth to a heavenly Tao. Chi-Tian drew out a wisp of blue pneuma and threw it to Su-Li. All my knowledge about immortals is from here. Su-Li didn't dodge and let the blue pneuma flow into her mind. As expected, she got information about the cultivation realm from it. It is declining, heading towards an irreversible destruction. At that time, everyone in Chi-Mo domain will be buried with it. Blazing Heaven's eyes were filled with sorrow. I can't save it. To it, we're all too insignificant. My current cultivation is mostly due to its guidance. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to achieve the martial monarch realm in just 10,000 years. It turned out that it hadn't been long since Chi-Tian became a great emperor. No wonder he couldn't join forces with Ling Qingshui to deal with White Demon. At that time, he probably couldn't even break through the barrier between the two worlds. As a foreign practitioner, Ling Qingshui knew little about the history of Qingshui's circle and didn't know the existence of Chi-Mo's circle. Su-Li, I'll bring you here. Blazing Heaven turned around with determination and hope in his eyes. You can use the boundary core of Chi-Mo's circle as you wish. As long as you can make a breakthrough in your physical body within a year and reach the minimum limit of integrating the thunder of tranquility. At that time, White Demon will no longer be an obstacle. And I only have one request. Su-Li narrowed her eyes slightly, and her voice was soft but firm. If I don't die, your idea will come true. Otherwise, I will be buried with the boundary core of Chi-Mo's circle. Ha 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 ha. Blazing Heaven looked up to the sky and laughed very happily. This time, I didn't misjudge you. Time is pressing, so I won't delay you. During this period, unless Qingshui's circle is destroyed by White Demon, I won't disturb you. Just do whatever you want. Blazing Heaven left without hesitation. Even if he still had a lot of doubts about Su-Li's identity, at this moment, he could only win a glimmer of survival by making a big gamble. In front of the quiet and cool Chi-Mo's circle, Su-Li flew forward and paused on the surface of the boundary core for a moment. Then she blended into the boundary core without hesitation. The contradictory feeling of coldness and warmth wrapped Su-Li layer by layer. Su-Li was shocked to find that her 5 senses disappeared at the moment she jumped into the boundary core. Instead, it was a vast and boundless field of vision. She seemed to replace the eyes of the boundary core and saw everything that happened in the whole Chi-Mo circle at this moment. She saw dozens of zombies sleeping in the black eggs in the depths of the dead zone. The 12th black egg was broken, and the zombies in it disappeared. But a crack appeared on the first black egg. She saw the Qianqing battalion in the whole Qingshui circle. Countless warriors worked at sunrise and rested at sunset. They tried their best to survive. She saw Ma Jintian, who was as thin as a stick, swallow the last elixir given by Bing Feng in the Ma camp, and his body was slightly full. Everything was in her eyes. Su Li couldn't help but think, was the communication between Qi Tian and the boundary core the same as what she experienced? No, if it was true, Qi Tian would have a way to deal with the zombie. Perhaps, only she could do it. But what was special about her? Her reincarnation was only the body of evil ghost. But for the boundary core, the body of evil ghost was similar to the breath of the dead zone. It was closer to the level of the enemy, right? Just when Su Li was puzzled, a thought came out of the boundary core, like a terminally ill old man, and slowly whispered in her ear. Descendant of the undead clan, I need your help. Descendant of the undead clan. Su Li was at a loss for a moment, and then she quickly realized that the body of evil ghost could be said to be the work of Black Lotus, but the undead clan, her pupils shrank. Was it left by her parents? Su Li was shocked. It was the first time that she heard the information about her origin. Black Lotus always said nothing about her reincarnation in detail. Maybe, her resurrection had nothing to do with Black Lotus Ring, but because of the bloodline of the undead clan. Just from the literal meaning, Su Li could understand that this clan seemed to be difficult to completely die out. Did that mean that her biological father or mother was probably still alive? After a while, Su Li temporarily suppressed the chaotic thoughts, forced herself to calm down, and tried to pass through a thought, how do you know that I am from the undead clan? It seemed that this question was too simple, and the boundary core quickly gave a response. If you are not from the undead clan, you will die at the moment when you integrate into me. If you are not from the undead clan, you will die. If you are not from the undead clan, you can't communicate with me, because the human clan and I are not in the same dimension. Your instinctive integration into my body is also the proof of the undead clan. Su Li listened quietly. Perhaps the boundary core realized that this undead clan had no common sense, so he didn't even know the talent of the undead clan, so it continued to popularize for her. Your undead clan feeds on the energy of the boundary core. Our Jia clan and you are natural enemies, but at this moment, there is a chance for cooperation. The boundary core of Qingshui Circle and I are compatriots, and there is no difference between us. At best, she is a little better, and I am a little worse. But 10,000 years ago, she suddenly swallowed the natural law that I was pregnant with, so that I was irreversibly polluted by the dead zone and went to death. Su Li fell into a long silence. She was quickly digesting every news brought by the boundary core. For her, it was like opening the door to a new world, and the information she received was completely different from the past. You are very strange. In addition to the talent of the undead clan, you have the pneuma of the same origin as the dead zone. If the essence of your soul was not from the undead clan, I would have killed you the moment you entered my body. Su Li was in a cold sweat, and her thoughts turned very fast. After a while, she transmitted the sound and asked, what is the relationship between you and the natural law? You can understand it according to the sects in your Qingshui circle. My existence is equivalent to the Grand Elder of a sect, and I am the root to maintain the existence of the sect. The natural law is the assistant to help me manage the sect. All the rules are made by me, and I give it the ability to send the divine punishment. Without me, it would not exist. What is the dimension? Su Li seized every opportunity to ask questions. She was very clear that if the boundary core didn't ask her for help, it wouldn't tell her so much explosive news out of kindness. You didn't inherit any memory about the undead clan. It seems that the bloodline of both sides who married with your parents was not simple. Otherwise, they would not suppress each other, so that you couldn't get the memory of any of them. So deceitful. Su felt helpless and surprised. Since it was difficult for the undead clan to die out, was the vitality of a clan as powerful as the undead clan also strong enough? That was to say, her parents were probably still alive, but she didn't know where they were. The dimension is not difficult for you to understand. You have entered the reincarnation mirror, which is the prototype of a dimensional treasure. You are one dimension lower in the mirror, and people outside the mirror can manipulate it at will. For me, all the creatures in the entire Chimo circle belong to me. I created them, so naturally, I am one dimension higher than them. Su didn't really understand it, but it didn't prevent her from seeing the attitude of the human clan like Chi-Tian. Just like humans to livestock, livestock to ants. Yes. Undead clan, you are very smart, and we have hoped to cooperate. The boundary core transmitted his thoughts. I will help you to make your strength reach the level of the great emperor in the human clan's mouth. At that time, you will have the strength to get rid of the parasites left in the dead zone. Those parasites are also a great tonic for you. The talents of the dead zone clan and the undead clan don't conflict. Su nodded, but she didn't feel happy at all. After listening to the words of the boundary core, she had too many doubts in her heart to be solved, and the most important one was still one point. How are you going to make me become the great emperor? How can I guarantee that you won't kill me after you get rid of the parasites? Chapter 660. Remember in 1 second, 800 mail sign small/say net wonderful pop-up window free reading. In the blue space, the spherical boundary core suddenly stopped rotating. At the same time, time in the outside world also stopped flowing at this moment. Fortunately, the stagnation time was very short, and no one noticed it except Chi-Tian. What happened? Chi-Tian frowned. Because of the previous promise, he didn't go into the Earth's core to find out. You are really a descendant of the undead clan. Even if you see the hope I give you in a desperate situation, you are still calm, unlike a native. The thought from the boundary core suddenly became much clearer, as if a person suddenly appeared and whispered in Su-Li's ear. Su-Li's forehead was covered with cold sweat, but she smiled. I can't do a losing business. Either we die together, or, you can think of a way to make the best of both worlds, and let me think about it. After these words, Su-Li's 5 senses returned, and she left the boundary core without saying anything. A gentleman doesn't stand under a collapsing wall. A human face appeared on the surface of the boundary core. Undead clan, I admire your wisdom. We can cooperate equally. Su-Li looked indifferent. The premise of equal cooperation is equal information. I am infected by the dead zone, and I can't interfere with the operation of Chimo Circle. The human face showed a helpless expression. I can tell you everything I know in exchange for trust. In the space of the boundary core, there was a long silence. Su-Li's eyes flashed. She knew that every word she was going to ask next had a price, so she must be cautious. The human face was not in a hurry and waited silently. She looked down on Su-Li before, intending to bombard Su-Li with a lot of information to entice Su-Li to become her agent of the natural law. That would indeed make Su-Li's strength rise to the level of the great emperor, but it meant that Su-Li would become her puppet without her own consciousness, and couldn't leave Chimo Circle. She would be her slave forever. Such a ceremony needed to be voluntary, otherwise it would not succeed. Su-Li's sobriety was beyond her expectation. She had no choice but to cooperate. As for why she didn't choose Chi-Tian to become the agent of the natural law, they were in different dimensions. Just like domestic animals, how could they bear the infusion of the intelligence of the human clan? Chitian's life level was too low. When time passed quietly for 2 hours, Suli took a deep breath and finally asked the first question: how can we eliminate BMO? She purposely asked very general questions. The broader the question, the more information she could get from the realm core. Boundary Core saw through Suli's mind at a glance. But her plan failed before. At this moment, she wanted to show her sincerity. So, she could only suppress the discomfort in her heart and said, I don't know much about White Devil. The only thing I can be sure of is that the sudden disappearance of the heavenly axiom I nurtured all those years ago is very likely related to him. Suli looked serious. In other words, he is the initiator of the destruction of Chimo's circle. Not bad. Realm Core's eyes became complicated. I lost contact with my elder sister. It is very likely that she was deceived and suppressed by White Demon. White Demon was able to control the natural law of Qingshui's circle. Apocalyptic Thunder Doom is not strong in the level of immortals, but for Ling Qingshui, who was seriously injured at that time, there was no way to resist it. All living beings existed for the sake of benefits. White Devil is no exception. Over the years, I have been thinking about his purpose, but I still can't understand it. It is likely to involve something at a higher level, even I can't understand it. Fortunately, his strength is not strong, so you still have a chance. I cannot help you much, but it is what you need most. As soon as he finished speaking, the blue pneuma began to surge and build a starlight portal. Suli's pupils shrank slightly. Chuangxing Path. Yes. The voice of Boundary Core echoed in the space, and the blue pneuma fluttered like willow catkins. Maybe you don't understand, but the founder of Chuangxing Path is the supreme of all realms. Your realm is stuck at the most critical step. If you can come back successfully, your strength will inevitably rise a lot. But with me, you can be lucky enough to get more in Chuangxing Path. The superposition of the luck of the two realms, Suli was thinking, but she did not recklessly enter the starlight portal. I spent a full 6 years in Chuangxing Path last time. Now I only have 1 year, or even less. Entering it is bound to be risky. The voice of Boundary Core was almost sighing. I can't guarantee that you can come back in time, but if you don't give it a try, you are not the opponent of White Devil. The secret skill he mastered is far more than yours. You can only break all skills by force. Even the secret skill you have mastered is not as much as him. Yes. Boundary Core admitted frankly. Suli couldn't help but think about the life level of White Devil. White Devil came from the starry sky. Since he mastered more profound knowledge than Boundary Core, did it mean that White Devil was also a higher life level? While thinking, Suli put her hands behind her back and looked up. Before Chuangxing Path, I need to make some preparations. If you think it over, you can come here again. The starlight portal will always remain open. After saying this, the face on the surface of Boundary Core disappeared and returned to its normal state. Suli gently took a breath, hid her emotions, and turned to rush out of the Earth's core. Qi Tian heard the movement and approached. He couldn't help but be stunned when he met Suli. Why did you come out? I need a lot of dead zone black stones. Suli was not polite at all. She stared at Qi Tian and said in a deep voice, the more the better, the faster the better. Qi Tian was shocked by her momentum. Although he was curious about what she knew from Boundary Core in such a short time, he didn't ask and turned to prepare. After a while, a specially cleared hall was piled up with black stones. It was Bing Feng, who had contact with Suli in Hemp Camp, who was in charge of this matter. Grand Elder Su, Boundary Lord said that you can do your best. All the martial kings of Qianqing Camp and Baiqing Camp have been dispatched. If we can't collect as fast as you, Boundary Lord will take action in person. Bing Fong said with a smile. Su Li nodded and turned around. Her small figure was soon submerged in the black stones. Grand Elder Su is really strange. Why does she have a special preference for the dead zone black stones? Does she want to rely on devouring the dead zone to save my Chimo circle? It's too exaggerated. Bing Fong was puzzled. Due to the limitation of his realm, he was destined not to understand the reason. He turned around and was about to collect more black stones. Suddenly, there was an explosion behind him. He looked back in astonishment and saw that slim figure reappeared in the white stone powder all over the sky. In just a short span of a few breaths, all the black stones had been absorbed. Bing Fong swallowed hard. The scene in front of him blurred. Seeing Su Li's questioning expression, he nodded quickly. I'm going to find Boundary Lord now. Seeing Bing Fong leaving in a hurry, Su Li looked down at her hands thoughtfully. After catalyzing the 2 Black Lotus magic swords, her speed of absorbing the energy of the dead zone increased by 100 times. Even she didn't expect that. So, it can save a lot of time. Su Li's eyes were clear. Was it the effect of fate in the unseen world? Here, you can be lucky enough, Su Li recalled what the Boundary Core said. No, this is the rule of the dead zone. It's the talent of the body of evil ghost. It has nothing to do with the Boundary Core. Su Li's eyes became clear again. She looked up at the door of the hall and saw Chi Tian coming in person. Looking at the stone powder all over the hall, he was amazed. Then he touched the universe ring, and black stones poured out continuously. Soon, the whole hall was filled again. I have told all the martial kings. You don't have to worry. Chitian's voice was low and firm. Su Li looked at him and suddenly felt pity for him, but she didn't show it on the surface. She said softly, "Thank you." The study was dotted with spiritual flowers that were not easy to cultivate. The fragrance was not strong, but refreshing. But Bai Xiu, who was sitting in the room at this moment, frowned slightly. Looking at the detailed information sent by Tainik Attic from all the major regions, he felt a slight pain between his eyebrows. The purpose of White Demon was so obscure that he had no way to know it. He could only infer the next action of the Fate Palace with a large amount of information. Therefore, all the unusual intelligence in the 81 large regions of Qingshui's circle was presented to his desk. But he obviously overestimated his processing speed. Seeing the jade slips piled up like a mountain on his desk, he could only sigh secretly and continue to work hard. Fortunately, after several days of sleepless efforts, he finally saw some results, so he didn't have self-doubt. He stretched his body and cleared a clean area on the desk. Then he accurately picked out a jade slip from a pile of jade slips and put it in the first one. Several mortal villages outside the cities of Jiuli region have been destroyed inexplicably. It is suspected that there are demons. Mortals were fragile. In the cultivation circle, they were like mayflies and could be easily destroyed. Such information in the files of Tainik Attic was normal, but Bai Xiu obviously didn't think so at this moment. He picked out the second and third jade slips, which recorded similar accidents in which the mortals' clans, villages, and cities were destroyed. Bai Xiu didn't stop until the cleared area was filled with jade slips, looking solemn. The interval between the submission of these jade slips was no more than 2 days. In just 2 days, on average, more than 5 mortal settlements were destroyed in each major region. The explanation that there are demons doesn't work anymore. Bai Xiu tapped on the table with his fingertips. In today's cultivation era, it was not suitable for demons to survive. Although there were more or less 1 or 2 mighty demons in each major region, mighty demons would not secretly eat mortals. Their appetites were not so low. Bai Xiu thought and pinched his knuckles, trying to get enlightenment through astrology divination. But this time, there was nothing but chaos, and he saw nothing. Since Bai Xiu knew that someone was messing up his plan, how could he not take precautions? Bai Xiu was not surprised. The crisis that Hua Yan sensed last time was resolved, which showed that he took the right step. All the primers were hidden in the reincarnation mirror by him, and the reincarnation mirror was also covered by astrology. Even if Bai Xiu mastered the rules, he couldn't send the thunder test. For thousands of years, Bai Xiu almost never took action except for the fight with Ling Qingshui. The next step was likely to be to tamper with the rules of natural law. What else could he use as a primer to send the thunder test? Bai Xiu thought about it, and his pupils suddenly shrank when he saw the jade slips on the table. Chapter 661. Senior Heavenly Star, why did you summon the Grand Elders of the 27 sects in such a hurry? Did something happen? Hua Yan came in a hurry. Bai Xiu didn't answer but asked, where are they? Hua Yan nodded, they're all in the main hall. Time is pressing. I'll explain it to you. Bai Xiu rubbed his eyebrows and walked quickly into the main hall. Then he saw the Grand Elders of the holy sects, including many familiar old friends. Although Xianghua's cultivation was not the strongest among the Grand Elders, he had saved the lives of the other 26 people. Therefore, he sat in the first seat on the left side of the main hall, while the seat opposite him was empty. There are 2 empty seats. Has Grand Elder Su returned? Xianghua couldn't help thinking. At this time, footsteps came from outside the hall. Everyone looked in the direction of the sound and saw a young man and sect master Hua Yan coming together. Seeing the young man's face, Xianghua's memory of his youth was quickly activated. He couldn't help but stand up and say in surprise, are you Senior Bai of Heavenly Star Valley? Senior Bai, you're still alive. Another person stood up with an excited look. Obviously, more than one person knew Bai Xiu. Although the others hadn't seen Bai Xiu before, Xianghua's words gave them enough hints. Was this man the most mysterious old ancestor of Tainik Attic? Sure enough, Ni's sex strength was not without reason. Even a hidden existence like old ancestor Heavenly Star could see him. Bai Xiu was still anxious, but his tone was calm. I called you here for an urgent matter. Not surprisingly, White Demon has already taken action. What? Everyone's expression changed slightly, and Xianghua was even more shocked. I've been paying attention to the Life Palace. They didn't have any obvious personnel movement. If even you could find out, White Demon would have died 10,000 years ago. Bai Xiu said in a low voice, he never likes to take action personally and often uses dirty tricks. If we find out, it will be too late. I've been collecting information recently and finally found something strange. Bai Xiu shared the information and told them his conjecture. As expected, the hall quieted down, leaving only the slightly heavy breathing of the half-emperors. Patriarch Phoenix Stream sighed. More or less, all of us have been harmed by the life parasite. We should be prepared for Devil Bai's methods. Senior Bai, if you have any ideas, just tell us. We'll do it. Looks like you've all guessed it. Bai Xiu swept his eyes over the crowd. If White Demon wants to continue to rely on the Heavenly Tao to destroy us, he will need a prelude. Cultivators killing mortals is an excellent reason. Although I don't know how he can put the blame on us, we have to guard against it. How do we defend against this? Patriarch Phoenix Stream couldn't help but ask. They had no experience with the Tao of Heaven. My ancestor once said that the Heavenly Tao might just be a tool. If it wants to punish someone, it must have a sufficient reason. If White Demon wants to give him a reason, then we'll deal with him at the source. Bai Xiu flicked his sleeve and threw out 28 jade slips, which automatically fell into everyone's hands. This secret technique is called the Heavenly Tao. After you cast it, all of your sect's actions will be watched by the heavenly Tao. If you do, then you do. If you don't, then you don't. At this point, Baishio narrowed his eyes and revealed a meaningful smile. If White Demon hastily framed him, he will pay the price for his carelessness. All the Grand Elders looked at each other and then agreed loudly. In the next few days, Baishio received the news of the massacre of mortals every day. There were too many mortals in the mortal cities, and the fate palaces could be chosen at will. He couldn't stop it even if he wanted to. He could only restrain his thoughts and wait patiently. Finally, one day, a person suddenly appeared in front of the gate of Ni sect. Facing the mountain gate covered in clouds and mist, she bowed slightly and lowered her head to call softly, Su Zipei of Zihan sect is here to see the Lord of Ni sect. Su Zipei of Zihan sect is back at this time. Hearing the report, Hua Yan's beautiful eyes flashed with vigilance. She ordered softly, call the Lord of Zihan sect. Soon, the Lord of Zihan sect, who was dressed in the costume of a supervisor, came to the hall. He looked calm and said after saluting, Lord, what can I do for you? Do you know where Su Zipei went after she left the sect? Hearing Hua Yan's words, the calm look of the Lord of Zihan sect suddenly changed. Su Zipei, is she back? Just outside the main gate. Hua Yan didn't intend to hide it. She said while observing the reaction of the Lord of Zihan sect. To her surprise, after hearing this, the first reaction of the Lord of Zihan sect was not happy, but more like fear. What was he afraid of? It's good that she's back. It's good that she's back. The Lord of Zihan sect didn't know that he was exposed. He said with a smile, I only know that she was later favored by a grand elder of a holy sect. People go to higher places, so I can't keep her. Later, I know that the holy sect she went to belongs to the Fate Palace. It's naturally good that she can come back alive. The strange reaction of the Lord of Zihan sect was noticed by Hua Yan. She pondered for a moment and transmitted the sound to Baishio cautiously. Not long after, Baishio's figure came out of the inner hole. When the Lord of Zihan sect saw him for the first time, he immediately showed a look of fear. He made a ho-ho sound, and his head swelled in a few seconds. Then with a bang, he exploded like a watermelon, and red and white blood scattered on the ground. Hua Yan waved her sleeves to block all the blood outside the shield. She frowned for a moment and ordered someone to clean it up. Seeing that Baishio was still meditating, she couldn't help but ask, Senior Bai, what's going on? Baishio frowned and shook his head, it should be a kind of curse. This person has been cursed for a long time. After I arrived, he sensed the crisis of information exposure and self-destructed. Hua Yan couldn't help but gasp, there is such a terrible curse in the world. Is it the work of White Demon again? No, it's another person. Baishio looked dignified and murmured, I clearly know her, but I have always ignored her existence. Thousand-faced witch. There was not one enemy, but two. Her curse was untraceable and sometimes even more terrible than White Demons. He didn't think deeply, for fear of falling into the trap of Thousand-faced witch. He looked up and said, it's been too long. Let Su Zipei come in. We can't let the messenger of White Demon wait for too long. Hua Yan nodded and ordered. Not long after, Su Zipei, dressed in the saintess uniform of Zihan sect, walked into the hall. Seeing that there was only Hua Yan in the hall, her expression relaxed a little. She stepped forward and bowed. Disciple Su Zipei pays respect to Lord. Hua Yan chuckled, Su Zipei, you are not a disciple of our sect. Why do you call yourself disciple? Su Zipei raised her chin slightly and said in a respectful tone, I was the saintess of Zihan sect. Since Zihan sect belongs to Ni sect, I am naturally a member of Ni sect. At this moment, I should come back to do my part for the sect. That's very good. Hua Yan clapped her hands gently, but what's the benefit for you? The conditions of our NI sect are not as good as your life palace. What made you give up your life palace and surrender to the enemy? The smile on Su Zipei's face was slightly stiff. She secretly surrendered to the life palace. Only the most core disciples knew that she replaced Ling Xian and became the saintess of the life palace. How did NI sect know it? Was there a spy in the life palace? It may also be a trick. It is indeed suspicious that I come at this moment. At this moment, Su Zipei thought a lot, but when she thought of the affirmative tone of Fate Ancestor, she quickly suppressed her panic and continued to say, "It is pure nonsense to surrender to the life palace. In fact, I have been secretly investigating the situation of the life palace for this moment. If I can submit a certificate of allegiance, can I return to NI sect?" Hua Yan's eyes flickered. Senior Bai Xiu was so clever. Su Zipei really wanted to do everything possible to have a relationship with NI sect. In this way, the sin of slaughtering mortals could be linked to NI sect, and then the Thunder Doom would fall. In this process, Bai Mo just lost an insignificant pawn. It was really a good plan. Looking at Su Zipei's appearance, she was probably still in the dark, which was hateful and sad. A trace of pity flashed through her eyes, but she soon calmed down. According to the previous instructions of Bai Xiu, she nodded and said, "I promise you, as long as the answer you give is valuable enough, what's wrong with letting you come back?" Su Zipei heard the sentence she wanted to hear most, and she relaxed a lot. Master said that no matter whether the Lord of NI sect fulfilled the promise or not, as long as there was this sentence, it would be done. She would be the greatest hero, and the position of the next palace lord would belong to her. Su Zipei took a deep breath. From the simplest beginning, from now on, she would fight for enough time for Master. In fact, among the top holy sects where the life palace belongs, the Lord of Xingtian Ancestral Temple has the lowest status. I don't know why, but the Lord of Xingtian Ancestral Temple can only be a breeze in the outside world. In front of Fate Ancestor, he is like a dog. Before Su Zipei finished speaking, she was waved by Hua Yan and forcibly interrupted. "What you said is gossip at most, and it is not good for NI sect at all. I will give you another chance to start again. Otherwise, you can leave now." Su Zipei's heart tightened, and she suddenly felt a sense of suffocation. Hua Yan looked very easy to talk to, but once she turned hostile, the sense of oppression she felt was no less than in front of Fate Ancestor. All this was naturally due to the secret method that Bai Xiu secretly used. In order to pry some useful information from Su Zipei, he also tried his best. Su Zipei wanted to show her sincerity, so Bai Mo couldn't do anything to her. This was a breakthrough, but the information revealed by Su Zipei might also be a smokescreen put by Bai Mo, and it needed to be carefully screened. At this time, Su Zipei finally adjusted her mentality and said again, "The purpose of Fate Ancestor has nothing to do with dominating Qingshui Circle. He seems to be born with a bottleneck and can't break through to Great Emperor, so he thought of another way, which is to use the life souls of all the talents in this circle to recast his foundation." This was the conversation she eavesdropped, but she couldn't care so much now. As long as she could control Hua Yan, these people would die soon. Who would know that she had leaked the secret? Hua Yan was really shocked by this information. In the unseen world, the rule of natural law operated on its own, and the thunder in the sky was faintly heard. But the thunder came quickly and left even faster. Before the ordinary disciples of NI sect could react, the sky cleared up again. In the White Palace, Bai Ming's smile froze on his face. Chapter 662. Phew, Bai Ming's face returned to calmness, looking at the vast mountains and rivers outside the palace. I have never suffered such a big loss except for Ling Qingshui. In the main hall of Ni's sect, Su Zipei froze in place. She didn't understand why the master, who always took everything into account, miscalculated this time. What about nature's punishment? She did everything the master ordered, but Ni's sect was still fine and not affected at all. Your information is really shocking. The pity in Hua Yan's eyes was no longer hidden, but how do you know that the news you heard from Mingzu is true? How do you know that he won't lie to you? He won't. Su Zipei was in a mess and shook her head repeatedly. It can't be false. I eavesdropped on that news. Then how do you know if he deliberately let you eavesdrop and conveyed the wrong news to us? Hua Yan pointed to the top of her head. The thunder just now is the best proof. Even God doesn't believe you. How can I believe you? Please go back. Come on, see the guest out. Su Zipei was at a loss. At this moment, she just wanted to go back to the Life Palace and ask the master what went wrong so that she failed. Seeing her leave the hall in a hurry, Bai Xiu walked out of the dark and followed her from a distance. Until she left the gate of Ni's sect and was suddenly struck into ashes by a lightning punishment in the sky, he confirmed his thoughts. He turned back with a smile on his face. In this confrontation, he had won. Except for Su Li, I can't believe that I will lose to others now. Bai Ming stood in front of the dot and laughed in a low voice. As he laughed, his eyes bloomed with dazzling light. My brother, you finally don't hide anymore. Ha 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 ha, interesting. Lord, what should we do now? The Lord of Xingtian Shrine, who followed him, couldn't help but ask. Bai Ming smiled slightly and spat out a word, wait. Wait? The Lord of Xingtian Shrine was full of doubts. Then he saw Bai Ming turn around with silver light flashing in his eyes. Wait for the fish to fall into the net. That is a big fish. Seeing that he had a well-thought-out plan, the master of Xingtian Shrine was relieved. But when he thought that Su Zipei, the new saintess of the Life Palace, died in the blink of an eye in Ni Mountain, he felt a chill in his heart. A few days later, there was enough stone powder in the Divine Hall of Regent Qi Mo to build another Divine Hall. Out of boredom, Qi Tian actually used the stone powder to build a black stone hall on one side of his Divine Hall. As the stone powder increased, the hall gradually expanded. The Realm Lord is bored again, the martial kings whispered and couldn't help but discuss. Yeah, wasn't the temple built out of boredom? Now the corpse spirits in the dead zone have been solved by Grand Elder Su, and I can't go to Qingshui Circle. I'm also bored. While everyone was busy transmitting the sound, suddenly a loud noise came from the palace where Su Li was. Then many martial kings were stunned to see a huge black lotus suddenly blooming on the roof of the palace. Then, the palace collapsed. Seeing this, Bing Feng couldn't help but praise, Realm Lord, you're so wise. You've already predicted that the palace would be destroyed when Su Yu's revered divine technique was completed. Everyone suddenly understood. I see. I'm short-sighted. You deserve to be the Realm Lord. Hearing the praise, Qi Tian's mouth twitched slightly. He really didn't think so much. Swish! A black light appeared behind him out of thin air and stabbed at him quickly. Qi Tian's expression changed slightly. His cold perception was extremely sharp, but he didn't step aside. Instead, he suddenly turned around and grabbed the black light. Puff! The black light passed through his palm, as if it didn't feel any obstacle, and went into the gate of the Divine Hole. Boom! Another palace collapsed, raising smoke and dust. Qi Tian didn't care about it. He just looked down at the blood hole in his palm, and his eyes were shining. Before Xian House, Su Li was just a seed with potential for him. But how long had it been? First, she broke the iron rule that the human clan couldn't improve their physical bodies except for immortal ascension. This time, the strength she showed was no less than his. "Brother Chi Tian, please open the earth core again." The voice came from the collapsed palace, from far to near. When the last word was spoken, Su Li's graceful figure was already standing in front of him. "With your strength, I made the right choice to go to the earth core again." Chi Tian laughed, and Su Li smiled politely. The two figures disappeared in an instant. Bing Feng looked at the two ruins in distress. The Realm Lord had rebuilt many immortal halls, so there was no need to build more. But the task of cleaning up the two ruins might fall on him. Su Li returned to the earth core. The face on the boundary core didn't appear, but the starry gate. Compared with the starry gate summoned by Su Li, the color of the starry gate summoned by the boundary core was thicker. Su Li didn't hesitate anymore. She stepped into the starry gate and disappeared. In a remote courtyard, a kind-looking woman was watering the vegetable field. A ray of warm sunlight passed through the window behind her and landed on the sickly girl on the bed. At a certain moment, the girl suddenly opened her eyes, and her eyes were bright. Su Li sat up and quickly recalled everything. After she stepped into the starry gate, she suddenly became another person. The test of the star path, Su Li was lost in thought. Suddenly, she heard the door open. "Chen, are you awake?" She quickly lay down again, closed her eyes, and controlled her breath. The woman saw that Su Li didn't move on the bed, but didn't leave the room. Instead, she walked to the window silently, and reached out to touch Su Li's neck. Su Li only felt a layer of goosebumps on her back. This woman didn't mean well to her. But she was new here, so she didn't know what happened. She could only continue to pretend to sleep, and secretly accumulate strength in case of accidents. But there was no strength in this body, so it was still a problem whether she could defeat the woman. The palm wind was silent but extremely cold. In the blink of an eye, it was only an inch away from Su Li's neck. Then it stopped for a moment and slowly retracted. After a while, Su Li heard the sound of the door being closed. Su Li's thoughts became active, but she didn't open her eyes, in case the woman was still observing her. It was also at this moment that a thought that did not belong to her came from the unseen world. It turns out that the owner of this body is called Duan Hongqin. Duan Hongqin. I seem to have heard this name somewhere, Su Li couldn't help recalling, and the scenes under her eyes quickly replayed. All of a sudden, her pupils shrank. A scene was enlarged in front of her. It was the first time she went to the star path. In the endless starry sky, the first line of words on the illusory ancient text like a list shone brightly in her memory. Star Lord, Duan Hongqin. Star Lord, Duan Hongqin. She remembered that she was called the third person of all times on the list, and the line above was the Lord of Kueyu Palace, whom she had heard from Black Lotus many times. At that time, the name on the list was Kueyu Star Lord, Lin Chen. Star Lord, Duan Hongqin, this name was even above Kueyu Palace. Thinking of what the boundary core said, the one who created the star path was Duan Hongqin, the Star Lord. This series of speculations made Su Li feel a little suffocated. The test of the star path here let me enter Duan Hongqin's memory. Is this her childhood? And I want to achieve a certain condition to be considered to complete the test. As Su Li's thoughts kept jumping, the memory she received was close to complete. The mortal village of Duan Hongqin's childhood was destroyed by practitioners overnight. Because of her quick-witted father, she survived and became the adopted daughter of the Jin family, an aristocratic family in Dragon City. But the Jin family adopted her not because the head of the Jin family was kind. She suspected that her adoptive mother believed that she was the orphan of that village. And after such a thrilling experience, Su Li didn't need to doubt anymore. A female practitioner in Jindan realm dressed as an ordinary family woman, which was a bit suspicious. The mortal village was destroyed, but the practitioners are still tracking the orphan. Something must be coveted. Suli gently held the black stone hanging in her arms with both hands. Was this the treasure? Suli searched through her memory. The stone was the only thing that Duan Hongqin brought from the village in her childhood. If she was right, if she could get rid of this woman, become stronger, and even track down the murderer who destroyed the village, she would complete the test. Finally figuring out the clue, Suli opened her eyes and frowned again. She was sure to defeat the strong as the weak, but it would take a lot of time. And what she lacked most was time. Senior, thanks to your wonderful foresight, the plan of White Demon was ruined. It's the first time for me to see White Demon being defeated. It's so cool. In the hall of the Ni sect, the Grand Elders of the 27 holy sects were all present, and they all praised Bai Xiu. Hua Yan smiled and watched quietly, and she looked more relaxed. Only Bai Xiu's expression remained indifferent with a solemn expression. He knew how powerful White Demon was. Although he gained the upper hand this time, White Demon just lost a small chess piece, which was not a big deal. He didn't know the real purpose of White Demon, so he couldn't figure out what to do next. Senior Bai. Xianghua got up and saluted, and asked respectfully, since the Grand Elders of hundreds of holy sects in charge of the Fate Palace were seriously injured by Grand Elder Su in the Battle of Ziyun House, and their poisonous life insect was also destroyed by Grand Elder Su, the Fate Palace only knows how to play dirty tricks. The Life Palace is holed up and only knows how to play dirty tricks. Now that we've exposed his scheme, if we gather all the cultivators to attack the Life Palace, we'll definitely win. His eyes were burning, and there was a strong desire to fight. Senior, it's time to fight. Bai Xiu frowned slightly and glanced at others. They were all eager to fight. They had been oppressed by the Fate Palace for thousands of years, and they needed a victory to be proud. But, could they really fight? White Demon was astute. Except for more than 100 Grand Elders of holy sects, was there really no other help? In the face of many expectant eyes, he took a deep breath and said, "To be cautious, I will do another divination. Don't be impatient." Xianghua nodded quickly when he heard the words, "Senior Bai's divination is unparalleled." "Thank you." Others echoed and praised him. They didn't know astrology, so they didn't realize what it meant for Bai Xiu to do divination in the state of astrology. Only Hua Yan, who was sitting quietly, frowned slightly and wanted to say something. "Sect Master Hua, can I trouble you to prepare the items on the jade slip and a secluded secret room?" Hua Yan took the jade slip handed by Bai Xiu and nodded gently. "Thanks to the gifts from the Grand Elders of the 27 sects, the sect warehouse has them. I will prepare them now." Chapter 663. Remember in 1 second, 800 mail sign small/say net wonderful pop-up window free reading. Hua Yan left the hall, and Bai Xiu also got up to prepare. The Grand Elders of various sects looked at each other for a moment, and then closed their eyes to rest. Attacking the Life Palace was the most important thing now. They would rather wait for the result here. No one left. In the quiet room, the materials for divination requested by Bai Xiu were soon ready. Hua Yan stood aside and quietly watched Bai Xiu burn the incense devoutly. When Bai Xiu got up, she finally couldn't help but ask, "Does divination affect you?" Bai Xiu paused for a moment, then looked up and smiled. "Divination is to calculate the mysteries of heaven. It's disrespectful. Even if it's a mortal's divination, it will damage his fate, let alone the cultivation circle. But for me at the moment, it doesn't matter whether it affects me or not. But I can see that you are hesitating." Hua Yan's eyes flashed. "What are you worried about?" Bai Xiu was slightly stunned, and then he was surprised. He looked Hua Yan up and down. It turns out that you are practicing the ancient sect, Hua Tao. I thought this sect had been lost for a long time, but I didn't expect that there are still descendants in the world. No wonder NI sect is difficult to penetrate. In front of Hua Tao, even White Demon can't panic. I just can't lie. Hua Yan smiled helplessly. I'm too weak to help. Don't belittle yourself. Bai Xiu shook his head and chuckled. If you weren't the Lord, I should let you enter the reincarnation mirror. The power of Hua Tao is far beyond your imagination. Although you were weak before becoming an immortal, your strength may not be less than Su Jojo's after becoming an immortal. Su Jojo is an evildoer, but only before becoming an immortal. After becoming an immortal, everything has to be recalculated. Bai Xiu said this and shook his head embarrassedly. In this state, I can naturally know a lot, so I can't help but say more. Hee. Hua Yan covered her mouth and chuckled. She bowed. Thank you for your encouragement, senior. I won't bother you anymore. As she said, Hua Yan turned and left the quiet room, and the door slowly closed. The smile on Bai Xiu's face faded, and he took a light breath, lit the spiritual candle, and slowly formed a seal with his slender hands. Specks of starlight gradually appeared, dyeing the white candle flame light blue, dark blue, until the quiet room became a starry sky. Bai Xiu leaned back, and countless images began to appear. The river of time contained tens of thousands of possibilities. His eyes rapidly turned and he soon found the scene after choosing to fight. It was a ruin. From the remains of the palace, Bai Xiu could tell at a glance that it was not the building of Ni sect, but it was not the life palace either. On top of the wreckage, two blurry shadows flickered continuously. Drops of dark red blood fell from between the two of them and dyed the sect mark on the wreckage red. When Bai Xiu saw the sect mark, his state of mind instantly fluctuated, and the image collapsed. When his consciousness returned to the quiet room, Bai Xiu gasped for breath and carefully recalled the scene just now, muttering to himself, "Impossible, why would it involve?" He composed himself and communicated with the starry sky again, entering the scene of choosing not to start a war. Countless scenes flashed before his eyes, and then stopped at a certain moment. The dark red sky was filled with wreckage and ruins. The same white shadows, the same blood, and the same sect imprints. The scene that appeared was exactly the same as when he chose not to fight. Hastily ending the star technique, Bai Xiu's face turned extremely ugly. In other words, whether he chose to fight or not, the result would be the same. Why was it like this? If the decision of this war was not up to him, then who? Bai Xiu closed his eyes gently, calmed down, and opened the door of the secret room. When Hua Yan came up, he said firmly, "Tianhe sect, I need any information about Tianhe sect, immediately." Hua Yan didn't know why, but she immediately flew away. Not long after, Su Mu and Su Yang were found by Hua Yan. These two were spies of Tianhe sect. They know a lot about Tianhe sect, and they are very happy to help us. Bai Xiu nodded. A trace of worry flashed in Hua Yan's eyes. Since Bai Xiu came out of the divination, he had been so serious. What did he see? Are you the master behind Tainik Attic? Su Yang put his head behind his hands and asked lazily. After many years, his temperament was the same as before, but his cultivation had reached the early stage of nature's test. His progress was extraordinary. Su Mu, who was silent on the side, also reached the early stage of nature's test. Bai Xiu's eyes flashed, and then he frowned slightly. His words shocked the two. You are not geniuses. Has your talent been forcibly tampered with? Su Yang's expression changed a little, and he forced a smile. You are really sharp-eyed. This is the first time we meet, but we have been seen through by you. I'm not your brother. Sumu glanced at Su Yang coldly and said lightly. Then he bowed to Bai Xiu. Senior, what do you want to know? I will tell you everything I know. Bai Xiu looked at the two people who were at odds with each other thoughtfully. After thinking for a moment, he asked, Who gave you your talent? Sumu frowned and said the name he didn't want to recall the most. Fong Mi, the master of the skill hall. Skill hall. Bai Xiu was surprised and lost in thought. No one in Qingshui's circle knew more than him about the news of Qingshui Palace in the past. After Qingshui's circle was destroyed, the subsidiary halls of Qingshui Palace did not disappear. Instead, they became stronger and stronger. After tens of thousands of years of development, they became the peak of Four Saints sect today. As for Xingtian Shrine, he hadn't found out which subsidiary it was. Bayamo covered up too many details for it, so he couldn't infer. The Chu family of Ankue Valley was developed from the Poison Hall of Qingshui Palace. The Yin family of Huangxing Palace was also a subsidiary of Qingshui Palace. Because there were many female practitioners, they had many marriages with Qingshui Palace. In those days, they were in charge of the Shang Hall and the Star Hall. Most of their deduction skills were taught by him. Now they became the minions of Bayamo, which was really ridiculous. As for the Fong family of Tianhe sect, Bai Xiu had always believed that it was a branch of the Instrument Hall. He didn't expect that they had secretly taken in the Skill Hall. The Instrument Hall and the Skill Hall were the two most powerful halls of Qingshui Palace. Now they were combined into one, so they had all kinds of ideas. How much did Fong Yuan know about the secrets of Tianhe sect? Bai Xiu temporarily suppressed his speculation in his heart and then said, Did Tianhe sect kill innocent people indiscriminately? How unjust were they? Yes. Su Yang almost blurted out, in order to create people with unparalleled talent, many ordinary disciples died in the skill hall for no reason. Does this kind of sin count as killing innocent people indiscriminately? Bai Xiu's heart sank, but he immediately nodded, yes. It made sense that the Sky River sect had been destroyed by the lightning tribulation. The Sky River sect had done this for many years. If White Devil wanted to, he could destroy it at any time. No wonder White Devil didn't care about the Sky River sect at all. Bai Xiu, who had vaguely speculated some clues, felt even more depressed. With the foundation of Tianhe sect, it should have been a help to destroy the Life Palace, but now, I heard it from my sister. Su Mu said to himself, regardless of whether Bai Xiu was listening or not, in order to overthrow the Life Palace, Tianhe sect once wanted to create an evildoer, but the skill hall had a limit, so the plan failed. In desperation, they had to turn their attention to the instrument hall, but I don't know the plan of the instrument hall. Hearing this, Bai Xiu suddenly felt that the doubts in his heart were solved. He couldn't help but ask, where is your sister now? If you know the plan of the instrument hall, maybe. She's dead. Su Mu's voice was calm and dull, but his eyes were red. A long time ago, in order to save us, she died in the hands of Fong Mi. She was the first disciple of Fong Mi. Su Yang turned his head and added in a low voice, and we are just her attendants. Bai Xiu was stunned for a moment and was silent. No wonder. No wonder that the Tianhe sect had always been friendly to the Ni sect on the surface, but once they talked about formal cooperation, they always avoided it. Only Fong Yuan was in the Ni sect, but he never stood in the position of the Tianhe sect and made any decision. He dared to do such a disobedient thing, so he was by no means an ordinary person. Although Fong Yuan was not the Holy Son, he could not make any decisions in Tianhe sect, and he even had no right to speak. All this could be explained. Thinking of this, Bai Xiu was full of complex emotions and finally sighed. After a while, Bai Xiu walked slowly in the hall of Ni sect. He looked up and saw 27 pairs of expectant and inquiring eyes, and he felt it difficult to walk. Next, every word he said would be related to success or failure, and everyone's life and death. He sighed and said in a low voice, "Whether we start the war or not, our odds of winning are like a drop in the ocean, extremely slim. I still don't understand what Bai Mo's purpose is. Everything I say next could be wrong, and I could go down in history with infamy. But even so, I have to say it. Tianhe's sect is the key to this war. In a month at most, Tianhe's sect will be in ruins." Everyone's expressions flickered. They had all seen the Tianhe sect's ambiguous attitude before, so how could they be willing to risk their lives for the Tianhe sect? "I believe you all understand that we can't afford to lose any ally now." Bai Xiu glanced at the crowd solemnly. "Send troops to Tianhe region immediately. Maybe I can resolve the crisis before the war." Since Senior Bai has said so, Xiang Hua was the first to stand up. "Holy Sect of Wind Thunder Sect will fight with you. Holy Snow Sect will also send troops. Phoenix Stream Sect will fight." Fight! Seeing the Grand Elders of Holy Sects stand up one by one, Hua Yan was so excited that she couldn't help smiling. Who could have thought that Li, who fought alone in the beginning, would gather such a huge force? Bai Xiu nodded to the people who stood up, but there was still no smile on his face. Although it was only intuition, he always felt that Bai Mo's purpose was not as simple as destroying Tianhe sect. He could have destroyed Tianhe sect long ago. Why did he choose this time? The picture of blood flowing like a river kept appearing in front of him. Bai Xiu felt very bad. He faintly felt that he had made a wrong decision, but he couldn't see what was wrong. Chapter 664. 34 Chinese Net, in 1 second wonderful pop-up window free reading. When the Ni sect gathered the 27 holy sects to go to the Tianhe sect, several days had passed in the world of Chuangxing Path. Su Li gradually figured out the life pattern of her adoptive mother and Duan Hongqin in their childhood. The Jin family was rich, but this small yard seemed to be forgotten by the Jin family. They lived a poor mortal life. Today was the day when she routinely went to the market to return the extra vegetables. It was also the only day when she was free every month. Her adoptive mother didn't seem to worry that she would get lost and let her go alone every time. Su Li guessed that her adoptive mother was likely to take this opportunity to observe her, so she didn't intend to show any abnormality. The Jin family seemed to be the top family in Fanglong City. Its mansion occupied an excellent location. Su Li saw the archway of the market not long after she went out. Rui Lane. She got information about this lane from the memory of Duan Hongqin in her childhood. It seemed to have a great origin and the commission for trading was not much. Both mortals and practitioners liked to trade in the Rui Lane. The Rui Lane was divided into the East Lane and the West Lane, which were clearly separated by a red line on the ground. Su Li came to her stall and sat down according to her memory. She lined up the fresh vegetables in the cage and put the price on them. 2 copper coins for a bundle of vegetables. Her price was low in the whole market. In addition, the vegetables were extremely fresh, so she sold them very quickly every time. Her adoptive mother didn't care how much she sold them. For cultivators, what could a few copper coins do? She just took this opportunity to observe whether Su Li was abnormal. In just half an hour, the vegetable cage was empty, and Su Li got 60 copper coins. She strung the copper coins and took out 2 of them. Then she found the supervisor who was taking a nap on the chair. "Lord, I'm here to pay the commission." Su Li spread out her palm. Before she reacted, the 2 copper coins were taken away. The supervisor of the market didn't raise his head and waved his hand impatiently. "How many times have I told you? Don't bother me if you don't get 1 tael of silver." "Got it." Su Li responded obediently and left quickly. The direction of her departure was not the small yard, but the lively market. Children should be playful. If she went back to the yard immediately, her adoptive mother would feel strange. Suli bought a skewer of sugar-coated haws with the copper coins in her hand. She took a bite of hawthorn and strolled with the gourd skewer. Seeing this scene, disappointment flashed in the eyes of his adoptive mother, who had been observing in the dark. She turned around and left. She had had enough. Give her another year. If there are no abnormalities, his foster mother's eyes were filled with killing intent. She let out a cold snort and quickened her pace, her figure disappearing into the crowd. Suli wandered aimlessly, but she was still thinking about the possibility of solving the situation quickly. Her cultivation had been stripped away the moment she entered this illusory realm. She was now a weak little girl who couldn't even defeat a strong adult. Using brute force to break out of this situation was not within his consideration. In that case, he could only fight with his wits. Fortunately, after her observation these days, she found that the cultivation system in this dreamland was similar to that in Qingshui Circle. Although practitioners in Jindan realm were strong, they were not without weaknesses. She couldn't reach the nascent soul realm, but as long as she could destroy her adoptive mother's vital parts, she might be able to kill her. But was his adoptive mother the only enemy? She couldn't be sure. For her, as long as her adoptive mother reacted for a moment, she could be crushed to death with one finger. Besides, no matter how strong the physical body of Jindan realm was, it was impossible for her to break through it with bare hands. She needed to prepare special fatal means and timing. Suli's heart was heavy. Then she took a deep breath and calmed herself down. At this moment, she needed to be calmer than usual, patiently waiting for the opportunity. Old ancestor Tianqing, what's the matter? In the main hall of Tianhe sect, the lord of the sect sat at the top. Feng Mu looked calm under his throne, but his heart was full of ups and downs. I don't deserve your honor. Bai Xiu shook his head and smiled. I don't like those who abandon the old masters and set up their own sections. If I hadn't predicted that your sect would be destroyed, I wouldn't have come here. Old ancestor Tianqing, I respect you as a senior. Hearing this, the lord of Tianhe sect lost his smile and looked cold, but you have to be respectful. Why can't I tell the truth? Bai Xiu's attitude didn't change at all, and his starry eyes were also cold. On the way here, I have been thinking about what I missed. Now I finally understand how a young man like you can lead the medium of witchcraft. Where is Feng Huaji? You. Hearing this, the lord of Tianhe sect's expression changed dramatically. Feng Mu, who was standing aside, was at a loss. Medium of witchcraft. Feng Huaji, wasn't he the founder of Tianhe sect? According to what old ancestor Tianqing said, the founder was still alive. Seeing the reaction of the lord of Tianhe sect, the grand elders of the holy sects who came with him understood and all looked cold. Tianhe sect really harbors evil intentions. Our Phoenix Stream sect has always admired your sect, but I didn't expect that we were wrong. The pressure from 27 grand elders of the holy sects was so great that when the lord of Tianhe sect was in a panic, another old voice suddenly sounded in the main hall. As expected, at this time, nothing can be hidden from Tianqing Valley. Why are you angry with a junior? Miao He, bring him to see me. The lord of Tianhe sect immediately breathed a sigh of relief and smiled again. He descended from the throne and turned a blind eye to Feng Mu's question. He just looked at Bai Xiu and said with a smile, Senior, please come with me. Bai Xiu asked the other grand elders of the holy sects to wait here and left the main hall alone. Feng Mu stared blankly at the back of the two, pursing his lips. Sure enough, my elder brother is hiding something from me. I was right that time. My elder brother came back. Uncle Chen, I don't understand, why? The answer in his mind rang in time. He is probably protecting you. Sometimes, it's not good to know too much. The truth is often the most unacceptable. In the dark hall, the blood-red veins flickered. Baishio walked slowly into the hall and saw the black sarcophagus. After a moment of silence, he suddenly laughed. I didn't expect that I would see you again after more than 10,000 years. I still have 1 year left, but it seems that you are in a worse situation than me. Baishio. A sneer came out of the black coffin. You are not qualified to criticize me. If it weren't for your brother, maybe the palace master wouldn't have died. Although you don't say it, you are atoning for your sins, right? Baishio looked sullen. What about you, senior? Is it right for you to transform into a demon and want to refine an evildoer? I have never said that I represent the right path. That's just a hat imposed by the outside practitioners. The black coffin said quietly, an evildoer is too powerful and difficult to refine. The highest achievement of the secret skill of blood replacement is only Feng Yuan, and the second is Feng Mu. The blood of the two brothers returned to the ancient times. When they were born, they absorbed nearly half of the talents here, but they failed to open the door of evildoers. Baishio's pupils shrank suddenly, and he couldn't help but step back a few steps. His face was full of horror. However, you are really crazy to experiment with your own children. I am not crazy, but sometimes if you want to get something, you must pay a sufficient price. The voice in the black coffin was calm. Although they failed, these two children are indeed the most dazzling geniuses of the Feng family. I bear all the negative karma, and they only need to enjoy the fruits of victory. But if they know that their talents are filled with the lives of countless people, are you sure they won't go crazy? Baishio's voice was sad. If you bear the negative karma, how can they pass the test of their state of mind? You seem to have misunderstood something. The black coffin was silent for a moment, and suddenly chuckled. I never want to hide it. Feng Yuan has always known it, including here. Before he entered the reincarnation mirror, he was a frequent visitor. What? Baishio's face changed instantly, and Feng Yuan's reticent face suddenly became a little distorted. Yes, but I don't know what stimulated him in the reincarnation mirror, and he even wanted to leave the sect. I could only tell him that if he left, I would shift the focus of training to his brother, so he stayed. Feng Huaji's tone was light, as if he was threatening two strangers, not his own children. Even so, Feng Yuan's cultivation progress still can't satisfy me. I let him go out to find his own chance, and turned my attention to the instrument hole. Just now, my new spiritual weapon has been successfully studied. Crack! A crisp sound rang in Baishio's ears, and the black coffin opened a gap. Baishio's face suddenly turned pale, and he was about to step forward to stop it, but he heard his knees plop on the ground, and he couldn't stand up. Crack, crack, crack. Boom! The cracks in the black coffin burst open at an unimaginable speed, and then a skinny white-robed elder jumped out of the black coffin and stood beside him lightly. Tianqing Valley, you witnessed the destruction of Qingshuwei Palace. Now, I allow you to continue to witness how I, Feng Huaji, destroy the Life Palace. Boom! Feng Huaji waved his sleeves, and the stone hall suddenly exploded, turning into countless spots of spiritual light. They followed the dense bloody veins underground, and wanted to spread to the whole Qingshuwei circle. Bai Su knelt on the only intact slate, his body trembling and his face filled with horror. At this moment, he finally understood why no matter how he calculated, he always saw the destruction of Tianhe's sect. Feng Huaji, became a great emperor in these 10,000 years. How could he resist the great emperor's decision? In an instant, the whole Qingshuwei circle was raging, and dark clouds were gathering. What happened? Many grand elders waiting in the hall only heard an explosion, and then saw the outside world suddenly darkened, and lightning flashed among the dark clouds. Oh no. Senior White must have failed. What should we do? As soon as the voice of Ancestor Phoenix Stream died down, she saw the dense bloody veins on the ground lit up. Standing on it, she felt that there seemed to be something extra in her body, but she couldn't tell what it was. Fong Mu stared at the veins on the ground. Suddenly, he bent over and vomited blood, which soaked into the bloody veins and flowed away. Seeing this, Xianghua's pupils shrank, and he flashed to help Fong Mu, who was lying on the ground. What's wrong with you? Fong Mu shook his head blankly. It's just a little disgusting. Hearing this, everyone looked at each other and saw the question in each other's eyes. Xianghua looked up at the sky outside, frowning. What on earth happened? Chapter 665. Remember in 1 second, 800 mail sign small/say net wonderful pop-up window free reading. In the gale, Fang Huaji's haggard face was expressionless, as calm as a pool of stagnant water. His snow-white hair fluttered behind him. He was waiting for the bloody veins to spread to the whole Qingshui circle. At this stage, if anyone wanted to stop him, he would not hold back. Senior. Bai Xiu knelt next to Fang Huaji, his hair disheveled, and he cut a sorry figure. He raised his head to look at Fang Huaji, starlight surging in his eyes. Do you know that I read my fortune? Do you know what I saw after the battle started? What? Fang Huaji seemed to be in a good mood as he continued Bai Xiu's words with a faint smile on his face. Did I win, or did I lose? Bai Xiu's eyes darkened. Tianhe sect, destroy. Oh. Fang Huaji nodded indifferently, then turned to look at the serious Bai Xiu and asked, so what? What I'm asking you is, did I win, or lose? Didn't you see it? Bai Xiu's expression turned dull. He didn't even care about the Tianhe sect. Fang Huaji had really gone mad. Lord Fate Ancestor, something bad has happened. The Lord of Xingtian Shrine hurried in from outside the hall, looking shocked and angry. There was an explosion in Tianhe sect just now, and blood-colored veins appeared on the ground. They are extending to the major regions of Qingshui Circle. Bai Ming turned around and pointed at the golden pagoda. I know. The Lord of Xingtian Shrine looked at the picture in the small golden tower and saw that the blood veins were moving forward like long snakes, eroding several miles in less than a breath. The Lord of Xingtian Shrine was terrified. According to this speed, the entire Qingshui circle will be occupied by the blood-colored veins in less than 3 months. My lord, how can we stop it? Stop. Bai Mingyue moved away from the small golden pagoda and landed on the face of the master of Xingtian Shrine. The smile was still there. Why do you want to stop me? The Lord of Xingtian Shrine was stunned and blurted out, isn't Tianhe sect our enemy? You can leave. You don't have to worry about this. I know what I'm doing. Go get Chu Lianqing. Seeing that he had a well-thought-out plan, the chief of Xingtian Shrine was no longer flustered. After a salute, he left obediently. A moment later, Valley Master Ankue came to the Life Palace Hall and stopped in front of Bai Ming. He bowed his head and said respectfully, Chu Lianqing greets Fate Ancestor. Bai Ming nodded. How are your injuries? Valley Master Ankue's expression became gloomy. He shook his head and said, if it weren't for Sir, I'm afraid I would have become a dull puppet like those holy sect's grand elders. I have been studying Su Li's blood poison, but I still haven't found any way to solve it. I can't even suppress it. I'm really ashamed. Bai Ming nodded lightly. If that's the case, put down your research first. I have something else for you to do. Chu Lianqing was taken aback and asked, what is it? Go find Yin Lin. She will move with you. Just listen to her. Chu Lianqing's heart sank when he heard Bai Ming's words. After being poisoned, his status was immediately below Yinlin. Ha, how realistic, Chu Lianqing nodded and said nothing. He believed in the law of the jungle. At this moment, his strength was affected by the blood poison, and he could not exert half of his usual strength. It was not suitable for him to rush ahead. After leaving the Life Palace Hall, Chu Lianqing came to Yinlin's palace in the Life Palace. When he walked to the door, the maids of Huangxing Hall immediately saluted. Valley Master has been waiting for a long time. Chu Lianqing laughed at himself and stepped into it. He saw Yinlin standing in the center of the hall. She stood in front of the candlestick with her back to him. You are here. Hearing the voice, Yinlin turned around, and her beautiful young face was reflected in Chu Lianqing's eyes. Fate Ancestor should have said that what we have to do next is simple. Chu Lianqing hesitated for a moment when he heard the words, but he couldn't help asking, won't it cause a big disaster if we leave Tianhe's sect alone? Yinlin's eyes flashed, and her tone became cold. Valley Master Chu, you talk too much. Fate Ancestor doesn't like us to question his decision. If it was in the past, it would be fine. But now your life is in his hands. Sweat appeared on Chu Lianqing's forehead. After a moment of silence, he changed the previous question, what are we going to do? Your Ankue Valley was originally the poison hall of Qingshui Palace. You have mastered the strange poison that can also work on practitioners in nature's test. Our Huangxing Hall is good at deduction, but our lethality is too weak. Fate Ancestor asked us to act together. Naturally, he used me as the lead to let you poison him. Chu Lianqing suddenly understood. Were they going to poison him secretly? Who are you going to assassinate? Yinlin smiled slightly. In Chu Lianqing's stunned eyes, she shook her head and said, not a person, but a sect. A sect? Chu Lianqing's voice rose a lot, is it Tianhe's sect? But Master clearly said that we don't need to care about it. It's Xingtian Shrine. Yinlin interrupted, but it made Chu Lianqing fall into greater shock. Xingtian Shrine could be said to be the most loyal sect to the Life Palace among the three peak holy sections. In terms of the number and quality of disciples, it was above Ankue Valley and Huangxing Hall. But now Fate Ancestor actually wanted to deal with Xingtian Shrine secretly. Why? He couldn't figure it out, but he didn't dare to ask Yinlin. The relationship between him and Yinlin was not as good as it seemed. How can we figure out Lord Fate Ancestor's thoughts? Yinlin smiled sweetly, whatever he asks me to do, I will do my best to satisfy him. If he asks you to destroy Huangxing Hall, what will you do? Chu Lianqing sneered, but Yinlin nodded naturally. How can a mere sect be compared with the great wish of Fate Ancestor? Chu Lianqing's face tightened. Although he was not very familiar with Yinlin before, Yinlin at the moment was extremely strange to him. She didn't even care about her own sect. What kind of medicine did Bai Ming feed her? If Bai Ming asked him to destroy his own sect, then he would never do it. Chu Lianqing, you have to think clearly. The smile on Yinlin's face was slightly restrained. Is Xingtian Shrine, which has little to do with you, more important or your life? I don't like to cooperate with idiots. You. Chu Lianqing's face changed slightly. He swung his sleeves and snorted coldly. I have no opinion on dealing with Xingtian Shrine. Hall Master Yin, you can arrange it as you see fit. Valley Master is indeed a sensible person. Yinlin smiled again. Xingtian Shrine is not on guard against us. It is not difficult to take action. What is difficult is the follow-up steps. Since Su Li's poison is so powerful, Hall Master Chu should know what to do. Don't be in a hurry to kill her. It's not your turn to teach me about poisoning. Chu Lianqing dropped a sentence and turned to walk out of the hall. I'm going to prepare the poison. You'd better finish the deduction before I finish. Lin looked at his back, and her red lips were slightly hooked. A sense of pity appeared in her eyes. But only for a moment, this trace of pity disappeared. She walked to the hall of the Fate Palace and stopped beside Bai Ming. She stared at the rotating golden tower, put away the awe she pretended to show to outsiders, and chuckled. Chu Lianqing has gone to refine the poison, good job. Bai Ming walked to one side and sat down softly. Through a water mirror, he looked at the haggard figure directly below the center of the dark clouds. When this matter is over, the second half of the ancient incantation book will be given to you, which contains the method of traveling in the starry sky. Even if you can't become an immortal because of the natural law, you can leave here, ascend to be a human immortal in the starry sky, and complete the transition of life level. Lin's eyes flashed, and she casually saluted, then, thank you, my lord. You have worked for me for the longest time among all the servants. But as my confidant, how can I treat you badly? You are very special, different from those nonentities. Bai Ming leaned lazily on the soft couch, looked at Lin with a smile, and said with certainty, in addition to this matter, you have other things to ask me. I really can't hide anything from my lord. Lin smiled sweetly, sat in the corner of the soft couch, and gently massaged Bai Ming's shoulders. There is one thing I don't understand. It seems that I am in a good mood today. Ask me. Bai Ming's tone was gentle, and he looked at Lin as if he was looking at his beloved concubine. Chu Lianqing's poison really can't be detoxified. Lin blinked, and his tone was a little curious. Bai Ming narrowed his eyes and took a deep look at Lin, which made Lin's hair stand on end, and his heart beat slightly faster. Then he said leisurely, Chu Lianqing is not as stupid as Ling Kuan. His performance in the past 10,000 years is remarkable, and he can be regarded as an example. He is just a little worse than you. What reason do I have to lie to him? Su Li is just a pawn made by you. Does she have such great ability? Lin's eyes showed doubt. In this world, there are still variables that you can't control. I am not omniscient and omnipotent, and there are naturally things that I am not good at. Bai Ming chuckled, and his tone was slightly regretful. Anything, as long as it is related to the level of life, can't be said to be easy. Lin's eyes flashed, and she immediately thought of a past event, but she didn't show it. She pretended to be apologetic. I was rude. Milord's talent, even in the starry sky, must be unique. Bai Ming heard the praise, but he was not moved at all. He just said softly, you have stayed too long today. Lin hurriedly stood up, saluted, and smiled softly. I'm leaving. When Chu Lianqing returned to Ankue Valley, he fell into the holy place of the valley to make poison. When he passed by the Saint Hall, he didn't know why he, who had never cared about the saint, pushed open the door of the Saint Hall. The smell of alcohol filled the air, with a faint stench. Chu Lianqing covered his nose with his cuff, frowned, and turned to leave, but he suddenly sensed endless sorrow from the depths of the shadow. Sorrow. Chu Lianqing's pupils suddenly shrank, and he subconsciously recalled the Qiyu evil skill. Sorrow, that was the fifth punishment. When did this kid, since the old ancestor is here, why don't you come in? You're making me embarrassed by staying at the door. A cold voice came from the hall, and the sorrow in it made Chu Lianqing's scalp tingle slightly. However, he was also the grand elder of a sect, so he quickly calmed down and walked into the hall with a cold snort. In a pile of wine jars, he found Chu Qingning, who had a beard and looked like a beggar, with a long face. Bastard, you look so embarrassed. Do you want to lose the face of Ankue Valley? Chu Qingning raised his head drunkenly and laughed evilly. When did the old ancestor care about us juniors? I haven't practiced much recently, but I am very sensitive to emotional changes. Old ancestor, your heart seems to be in a mess. Chapter 666. Remember in 1 second, 800 mail sign small / say net wonderful pop-up window free reading. Chu Lianqing's expression remained unchanged, but he was shocked. What was his cultivation? What was Chu Qingning's cultivation? How could he be seen through by a junior? Was the Qiyu evil skill really so powerful? When Chu Lianqing thought of this, he was suddenly stunned. He found out his background and found that Chu Qingning not only had a terrifying progress in the holy method, but also his cultivation had silently risen to the late stage of nature's test. In less than a month, he had crossed 4 realms of the holy method in a row. How could he directly cross a big realm and 3 small realms in 1 step? He was only 1 step away from the junior emperor. Moreover, if he hadn't suddenly come to take a look on a whim today, maybe in a few months, the 7 feathers evil technique would be perfected, and the holy son of Ankue Valley would become the elder of Ankue Valley. Chu Lianqing felt extremely absurd, but the fact was really in front of him, which made him silent for a while. This time, Fate Ancestor's plan failed again and again. His luck was too bad. He really didn't know whether Ankue Valley would be affected if it went on like this. Seeing Chu Qingning drinking by himself again, Chu Lianqing was silent for a moment and suddenly said, "Su Jouzhou is Su Li. I saw it with my own eyes." Chu Qingning paused, and then raised his head to drink a big mouthful of wine. He chuckled and said, "Old ancestor, why do you tell me this? Aren't you surprised?" Chu Lianqing was puzzled by Chu Qingning's attitude. Chu Qingning put down the wine jar and shook his head. "I'm very surprised. Yin Shuedong and others don't believe their feelings, just like you, old ancestor. They have to see it with their own eyes to believe it. But I'm different. I feel right. If I think she is, she is." Hearing this, Chu Lianqing suddenly felt that he might have underestimated Chu Qingning too much. But it seemed that it was too late to repent now. "If you were in my position," Chu Lianqing unconsciously changed his address, "what would you do?" Chu Qingning raised his head and blushed. He said lazily, "It depends on what happened to you. You are willing to ask me, a junior, for advice." Chu Lianqing seemed to have foreseen that he would ask this question when he asked the question. He didn't hesitate and said directly, "I was poisoned by Su Li and suppressed by Fate Ancestor. Fate Ancestor asked me to imitate Su Li's poison and poison everyone in Xingtian Shrine." The smile on Chu Qingning's face disappeared instantly, and he murmured, "This is not good. Old ancestor, you can only attack Xingtian Shrine, otherwise Fate Ancestor will let Xingtian Shrine deal with our Ankue Valley instead." Chu Lianqing's old face scrunched up. "Is there a need to do this?" Chu Qingning pointed to his head. "Intuition. I believe in my intuition. If you really want me to give some arguments. In my opinion, Fate Ancestor never takes human life seriously. Although you are the same, he is different from you. I can't tell. Just like the sacred spirit blood calamity back then, ancestor, you more or less felt a bit of pity and discomfort in your heart. But I believe that the Fate Ancestor will not feel this way." "Why?" Chu Lianqing pretended not to hear the sarcasm in Chu Qingning's words and continued to ask. Chu Qingning spread his hands and said straightforwardly, "I don't know. As I said before, I believe in my intuition. It's up to you whether you believe it or not." Chu Lianqing's eyelids twitched. He resisted the urge to slap the rude son in front of him and continued, "What should I do? Just continue to poison. The death of the people of Xingtian Shrine is not regrettable." Chu Qingning looked indifferent. Chu Lianqing turned around and was about to leave, but he continued, "Even if I die, I have to die clearly. Isn't it in vain? My sense of existence is very weak. I can go to Tianqing Valley to ask. You always say that Fate Ancestor will take us to the peak, but I don't think it's true. Since he secretly took charge of Qingshui's circle, too many practitioners have died. Chu Lianqing was slightly shocked. He vaguely grasped something, but he felt that he didn't understand anything. He pondered for a moment, waved his sleeves to break the chain to prevent Chu Qingning from going crazy, and said in a low voice, "Don't be found by anyone." Chu Qingning got up and cast a spell to sweep away the smell of alcohol. He bowed to Chu Lianqing, and his drooping eyebrows were full of sorrow. "Thank you very much." A moment later, Chu Qingning appeared on the ground where the blood-colored veins spread. He looked bleak. He took a deep look at the direction of Huangxing Hole. He didn't go to the unique transmission matrix of Ankue Valley, nor to the transmission matrix used by ordinary casual practitioners. Instead, he left the holy region by relying on his body movement. He was transmitted to the holy snow region by the transmission matrix of a nearby large region. After that, he passed through several large regions before he came to Zhuzhou region. It took him a whole month to get there. When he set foot on the land of Zhuzhou region, he had already seen that the blood-colored veins spread here. He identified the direction of Ni's sect and was about to hurry, but he was stopped by two figures. Seeing these two people, Chu Qingning's cold expression changed instantly, and his dead eyes flashed with light. "You are..." Luo Yichen stood in front of Mei Ruhan and looked at Chu Qingning. His usually cold face showed a smile, and his voice was gentle. "Although old friends reunite, you can't stare at my wife like this." Chu Qingning wanted to laugh, but his heart seemed to be drowned by the sudden sadness, and he couldn't laugh at all. Luo Yichen stepped forward and patted him on the shoulder. "There's no need to say more. We have been living in seclusion, but the trouble Su Jojo made was too big. Ruhan and I couldn't help it." When Chu Qingning heard this, a smile finally appeared. "Su Jojo is Su Li. I was severely beaten by her." Mei Ruhan was not as haggard as before. Under the care of Luo Yichen, although her cultivation was still in Yuanying realm, her appearance was not as haggard and horrible as before. At this moment, hearing Chu Qingning's words, Mei Ruhan immediately remembered the illusion she saw inexplicably in Yushu's sect. No, it was not an illusion. That tone, it was definitely her. Mei Ruhan couldn't help being excited, and her hands began to tremble again. Luo Yichen held her hand nervously, and his eyes darkened. He said to Chu Qingning, "Let's talk in another place." Chu Qingning glanced at Mei Ruhan, who was obviously not normal, and nodded gently. After a while, the three of them came to a very clean thatched hut in the mountain forest. The grass and trees were still very fresh, and it should have been built not long ago. After coming to Zhuzhou region, Ruhan and I temporarily lived here. The nimbus here is scarce, and there will be no practitioners passing by. Luo Yichen cautiously closed the door, but did not set up a bounded domain, for fear of suspicion. Chu Qingning sat down and looked at Mei Ruhan, who had been trembling all the time. Then he turned his eyes to Luo Yichen, who looked normal. He couldn't help but ask, "Aren't you afraid that I have changed? The sadness in you won't lie." Luo Yichen smiled very lightly. "If you hadn't untied the knot in your heart, the progress of the evil skill of 7 moons would not have been so fast." "How do you know?" Chu Qingning didn't understand. Fortunately, Luo Yichen quickly gave him the answer. "Because I also practiced this skill, and it has reached the consummation." Chu Qingning looked stiff, and then he heard Luo Yichen continued, "In terms of talent, you are not as good as me." Chu Qingning's eyebrows twitched, and he reluctantly raised the corner of his mouth. "You are more annoying than before. You are not bad either. If Su Jojo hadn't caught you in advance and you had successfully passed the second test, I would have killed you." Luo Yichen's expression returned to normal. "You also went to the Tianzhou competition." Chu Qingning was shocked. "Aren't you living in seclusion?" Luo Yichen replied expressionlessly, I lied to you. Chu Qingning, don't tease Qingning. Mei Ruhan finally said. Her voice was like a worn bellows, hoarse and unpleasant, which scared Chu Qingning. Chu Qingning immediately became serious when Madame said that, do you know the thousand-faced demon girl? Who? Chu Qingning was at a loss. For the past of Qingshui's circle, he, who was born lazy, knew the least among the four holy children. Luo Yichen patted his forehead helplessly. I knew it would be like this. Take us to NI sect. Why don't you go by yourself? Of course, there is a reason. Chu Qingning didn't understand what was going on, but he still knocked on the gate of NI sect. With his identity, NI sect was naturally like facing a formidable enemy, so he was soon received by Hua Yan. During the period, Mei Ruhan passed a message to him, which made him vaguely understand the reason why these two people couldn't enter NI sect. He divided half of his soul to help me expel the remnant soul, so, his temperament changed a little. Chu Qingning understood and fell silent again. After a while, the three people came to the main hall of NI sect. Hua Yan saw Mei Ruhan and smiled, long time no see, Ruhan. Mei Ruhan was stunned and nodded gently. When Su Li was the holy girl of Yushu sect, she had a good relationship with Hua Yan, at least on the surface. Yichen helped me successfully get rid of the old soul, just recently. She touched her eyebrows and showed a shallow smile, the spell has failed, so I can say a lot of things. Hua Yan and Chu Qingning were a little confused after hearing it. Fortunately, Luo Yichen added on. Do you know the thousand-faced demon, Lord Hua? Hua Yan's eyes flashed, I've heard that she is the helper of Fate Ancestor. She can change into anyone's Numa, and Senior Bai has not found her. I used to be her disciple, and many secrets were sealed by her spell. As long as I said it, I would be tortured and die. Mei Ruhan's eyes were deep, until a new soul was born in the reincarnation mirror, and then I went crazy for 1,000 years because of the fight between the two souls. Until Yichen rescued me and cured me, I could completely get rid of her control. Hua Yan was shocked after hearing it. She didn't expect that Mei Ruhan had always been the disciple of the thousand-faced demon. What's the situation with Fong Ling? Mei Ruhan clenched her sleeves with both hands. After I went crazy, I became an abandoned pawn. Now I should be dead in the eyes of the thousand-faced demon. She needs a new pair of eyes to observe Yushu sect, so Fong Ling became a new pawn. Hua Yan thought of Fong Ling, who was still locked in the dungeon, and breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, Su Li didn't care about the old relationship and released her. At this moment, Mei Ruhan said again, Fong Ling didn't volunteer. She just felt guilty. In order to help me, she took the initiative to become the disciple of the thousand-faced demon. I hurt her. Luo Yichen held Mei Ruhan's cold hands tightly and said to Hua Yan, it was Fong Ling who contacted me that year. Chapter 667. Maze of books in 1 second, wonderful pop-up window free reading. Hua Yan was surprised, but also understood. Su Li once went to the dungeon alone to see Fong Ling. Although she didn't release Fong Ling after she came out, all the punishments in the dungeon were removed, and she was simply imprisoned. Did Fong Ling take the risk to reveal something to Su Li at that time? Hua Yan's mind flashed for a moment, and her attention was soon attracted by Mei Ruhan's laughter. Can you tell me now? Who is the thousand-faced demoness? Mei Ruhan closed her eyes and sighed, I don't know who she is. She is beautiful and looks young. She always likes to wear a light yellow palace dress. Sometimes she stands in a pure white palace, and sometimes she stands in a luxurious golden hall. Sometimes there is an old woman in a gray robe walking around her, who looks like an elder, Yin Lin. Chu Qingning interrupted Mei Ruhan's description, and his face was full of horror. Yin Lin, the master of Huangxing Hall. In this way, Huangxing Hall is also controlled. Hua Yan's face darkened, and she performed a hand seal. I'll send a message to the Exalted One and Patriarch Heaven Star. As soon as the Exalted One returns, he'll receive it immediately. Something has happened in the Milky Way sect, and the blood veins are spreading everywhere. I wonder how Senior White is doing in the Milky Way sect. The situation is becoming more and more chaotic. Luo Yichen's voice was heavy. He turned to Chu Qingning, who was anxious, and said, "We can't act rashly to alert the enemy. Blind action will only hurt Yin Xuedong. You should understand." Chu Qingning's body shook slightly, and then he relaxed. He said with difficulty and sadness, in this war, I am not even a junior emperor. What can I do? Let's go to the reincarnation mirror. Hua Yan said solemnly, Chu Qingning, your practice method is not perfect. What you lack is time. As for Luo Yichen, your divine soul is damaged, and it will take a long time for you to recover. The reincarnation mirror can help you. Feng Yuan and others were also inside. Once the battle situation changes, I will immediately wake you up. Before that, we should prepare as much as we can to increase our chances of victory. How about that? The hall fell into a long silence. After a while, two responses were heard. All right. The stone palace of the Heavenly River sect was densely packed with crisscrossing blood-colored veins, like a red carpet covering the ground. A month had passed. Feng Huaji had waited for a long time, but the Life Palace had not sent anyone to stop him. Why? Why didn't anyone stop me? Bai Xiao, who had been forgiven and did not have to kneel, sat cross-legged on the side. He calmly said, if this junior asks you to stop now, would you be willing? Of course not. Feng Huaji's eyes flickered. I have painstakingly prepared for 10,000 years just for this day. Then there's nothing more to say. Bai Xiao sighed bitterly. I only hope that you can let the grand elders of holy sects leave Tianhe sect and leave a hope for Qingshui circle. I can promise you. Feng Huaji nodded nonchalantly. But if we let them go for nothing, what would happen to the Tianhe sect? You have to give me a reason. You want information. Bai Xiao was helpless. Feng Huaji was still obsessed with going about things the wrong way. In his opinion, no matter how much information he had, he would not be able to turn the situation around. Everything was already doomed. The fact that White Demon didn't attack meant that he was confident. At this moment, a message talisman flew out of the void, turned into a light dot beside Bai Xiao's ear, and disappeared. Hearing Hua Yan's voice, Bai Xiao's face darkened again, and he whispered, Yin Lin of Huangxing Hall is the thousand-faced demon girl. Feng Huaji's face changed slightly, and then he smiled with hatred and madness. Very good. I am very satisfied with the information you gave me. I will let those grand elders of holy sects leave. What is your plan? What is the function of these bloody veins? Looking at Feng Huaji's distorted face, Bai Xiao couldn't help but feel a chill on his back. He braced himself to ask. Feng Huaji stopped smiling, and he looked unfathomable. 2 months later, you will understand why I am so sure. It was a silent night. In the morning of the next day, the sun rose from the east, dispelling the chill in the small courtyard. Su Li got up early. Today was the day to go to the market in the middle of the month. Su Li was busy in the vegetable field until the basket was filled. Then she straightened up and wiped her sweat. She shouted to the house, Mother, I am going to the market. I will be back before dark. Go ahead. Be careful on the way. The gentle words came from the house, as if she was really a kind adoptive mother. Suli responded, turned around and skipped away from the door of the small courtyard. A gloominess flashed through her clear eyes. A month had passed, but she still didn't get any opportunity to take advantage of it, which made her a little anxious. If she was delayed in the illusion for 6 years like last time, even if she broke through to the Great Emperor realm, it would be too late. Opportunity, opportunity, she murmured in her heart, but on the surface, everything was normal. She finished the task of the day and didn't return until the evening. It seemed that she walked a little faster, and the sharp blades of grass on the side of the path cut a wound on her calf. She screamed in pain and squatted down to check it. She found that it was only a very shallow wound, and her expression suddenly relaxed. She was about to stand up and rush home, but her eyes suddenly froze on the withered and black curled-up grass. Many grass in winter were frozen like this, but she was clearly cut just now. The curled-up and black grass was very soft. How could it be so sharp? Blood poison. Although her cultivation was isolated by the illusion, her talent was still there. Suli's eyes were faintly bright, but she didn't immediately confirm it. It was getting dark. If she didn't go back, her adoptive mother would notice something wrong and come out to find her. Back in the small courtyard, Suli handed the copper coins to her adoptive mother as usual. Then she washed her hands by the well and returned to the dining table to pick up the chopsticks. How was the marketplace today? Her adoptive mother's eyes were full of gentleness. If Suli didn't see it, it would be difficult to perceive the malice in her eyes. She just needed to complete a test, and didn't need to consider the subsequent consequences. How did Duan Hongqin, who was still a child, perceive her malice and escape from the predicament? Suli couldn't help thinking about it, but she replied as obediently as usual, nothing special. I accidentally cut my foot on the way back, but the wound is not deep, so I don't need to bandage it. That's good. I will go to my parents' home tomorrow and come back that night. Stay at home and don't run around, okay? Yes, mother. Well, that night, Suli fell asleep and closed her eyes. Her thoughts became active. Her parents' home. She probably didn't go to her parents' home. She went back to the sect, or someone else came to find her, but it was inconvenient to meet her in the courtyard. Anyway, she wouldn't monitor the courtyard tomorrow. But it couldn't be ruled out that she had someone to monitor her. She still needed to be careful to test the effect of the blood poison. She repeatedly thought about the plan for tomorrow in her mind until it was clear. Then she fell asleep. The next morning, her adoptive mother left the courtyard as expected. Suli got up, dressed, and patiently watered the vegetable field. Then she sat in the central room for a moment and sighed to herself. It's so boring. It's a pity not to see the lion trick in the marketplace today. Since my mother will come back at night, I will sneak out and come back at noon. No one will find it, right? Suli muttered, and her eyes became brighter and brighter. Finally, she plucked up her courage, took out a few copper coins, and sneaked out of the courtyard. After a while, a black shadow appeared in the quiet courtyard and whispered, I didn't expect that the master has the potential to be a good wife and mother. She dotes on this little bastard so much. Not bad. After saying that, the black shadow returned to the room. He had monitored Duan Hongqin for several years, and there was nothing unusual at all. The master made a wrong decision and gradually lost his patience. His mind gradually turned to other things. Soon, this girl would be killed by the master. It was okay for him to be lazy occasionally. After Suli came to the marketplace, she didn't feel that she was being watched after several attempts. She secretly breathed a sigh of relief. First, she went to the clothing shop to buy a robe and put it on. Then she stepped into the most luxurious attic in the center of the Rue Lane, which she had never entered before. After this month's observation, she found that the operation mode of Rollercoasters Lane was surprisingly similar to that of Tiny Attic. Therefore, she was more or less confident this time. As soon as she stepped into the gate, a female practitioner with a delicate face greeted her. Seeing that Sully covered her face, she didn't care and bowed gracefully. "Guest, why are you here?" Sully stretched out her hand and put the porcelain bottle containing the blood in her palm. She said softly, "Help me test the power of the poison in it. I can give you some of my blood as a reward." Hearing that, the smile on the female practitioner's face faded a little, but she was still polite. Although it was not common to test the power of poison, it was indeed the business of Rollercoasters Lane. She carefully put away the porcelain bottle and bowed. "Guest, please wait a moment." Sully nodded gently and said lightly, "Don't touch it directly with your hands. Otherwise, your cultivation won't last until your elders come to rescue you." She still had good eyesight. Naturally, she could see that the female practitioner in front of her was just in Juji realm. If the power of her blood poison hadn't weakened, she could make the female practitioner disappear if she touched it. The female practitioner's hand trembled slightly. She looked solemn and quickly put away her previous contempt. "Senior, thank you for reminding me." She had despised Su Li's young voice and the physique of a mortal. But since Su Li could see her cultivation, she couldn't be a mortal. It was she who couldn't see through the cultivation of the senior. Thinking of this, the female practitioner dispelled the idea of testing casually. She knocked on the door of a supervisor with the porcelain bottle. "What's the matter?" A quiet voice came from the door. The female practitioner took a deep breath. The power of the poison may be above Jindan realm. Squeak, the door was opened from inside. An old man came out with a little surprise on his face. "This place is remote, but there is poison equivalent to that of Jindan realm." "Where is the poison?" "It's in my hands." "Then come with me." "Yes, supervisor." The female practitioner nodded and followed him. She was anxious. She didn't know much about poison, but now she faintly realized that maybe she had exaggerated too much. A moment later, the old man and the female practitioner came to the underground place where the demon was imprisoned. As a branch of Rui Lane, it couldn't afford to raise a poison master. The method of testing poison was very primitive, which was to let the demon try the poison. The old man went straight to the dungeon where the demon in Jindan realm was imprisoned. This demon in Jindan realm was obviously starved. Its eyes were red and it had lost its mind. The old man looked slightly serious. He took out a piece of spirit beast meat and carefully dripped a drop of Su Li's blood on it. Seeing that there was no change in the meat, he frowned slightly but didn't say anything. He threw the meat into the cage. The demonic beast immediately jumped up and swallowed it in one gulp. Its eyes regained some clarity and it spoke in the human language. "Human, what did you feed me?" "I feel much better now." The old man was expressionless. He turned his head and glanced at the female practitioner. The female practitioner suddenly panicked. When she was about to explain, she suddenly heard the scream of the demon. It melted like ice meeting fire. In the blink of an eye, it became a pool of blood. The female practitioner's panic stopped abruptly, and her eyes were full of fear. She couldn't help trembling when she thought that she had a whole bottle of horrible poisonous blood in her hands. The old man had seen the world, but the porcelain bottle in his hand couldn't help but tremble. "Hurry up. Invite the senior who provided this poison to the Tianzi room on the top floor." Chapter 668. Su Li was sitting in the lobby on the first floor. She was not sure whether her blood poison had been weakened. The only thing she was sure of was that even a junior emperor was helpless against her poison. Even if it had been weakened a lot, it was very likely to reach the effect of killing someone in Jindan realm. After waiting for a long time, Suli quickly saw the female practitioner who had just left, and the fear in her eyes had not faded. Her mind immediately became incomparably tranquil. "Senior, the steward invites you to the top floor for a detailed discussion." Suli was not afraid at all and chuckled. "It seems that the effect is good." It was more than good. The female practitioner's face was full of a sincere smile, and she respectfully led the way in front. After receiving such a senior, her reward might exceed her expectation. After a while, they came to the top floor. The steward had been waiting here for a long time. At this moment, seeing Suli's costume, he didn't care and quickly got up to greet her. "I am the steward of the Fanglongqing branch of Rui's shop." "Nice to meet you, senior." Suli said and stepped over the bowing old man. She said casually, "Get up. How is the effect of the poison?" Seeing Suli's attitude, the old man was not surprised at all. This was the attitude of a strong person. If Suli showed her cleverness in front of her adoptive mother, the old man would definitely doubt whether she was lucky to pick up the bottle of poison. Although the old man couldn't sense any cultivation of Suli at this moment, how could she be a mortal with such a graceful bearing of a high position for a long time? "Senior, there is no poison master in our branch, so we can only test it on monsters. Just now, a monster in Jindan realm only swallowed a drop of your blood poison. It only lasted for a few breaths, and then it died violently. Even the corpse couldn't be found. If you want to continue the test, I'm afraid you need to go to a bigger branch." After answering, the old man's heart beat like a drum. Even he was not satisfied with the test result. If the senior got angry, it doesn't matter. Jindan realm is enough. Suli picked up her own porcelain bottle on the side of the table, unplugged the stopper, filled the empty wine cup with half a cup, and handed it to the old man. The old man was so scared that he stepped back and hit the cabinet. His face suddenly turned pale. Suli chuckled. "What do you think of the reward of your shop?" The old man wiped the sweat off his forehead, swallowed a mouthful of saliva, and forced a smile. "Too much. Even the lives of 1,000 golden core stage beasts were not worth this cup. This old man does not dare to be greedy. If senior has any other instructions, this junior will definitely not refuse." "You're quite perceptive." Suli's tone was still casual. "I do have a little favor to ask you." The old man was startled. He collected his thoughts and said respectfully, "Senior, please speak." Night fell. Suli sat at the dinner table and waited for her adoptive mother to come back with her little feet crossed. She was hungry alone, but she still waited. She stared at the gate of the courtyard motionlessly with her clear eyes. When it was almost midnight, the wooden door quietly opened and his foster mother walked out of the darkness. Her cold and solemn expression was somewhat frightening. "Mother, you're back." Suli's eyes lit up. She immediately jumped down from the stool and trotted all the way to hug her foster mother. Zhang Yueru stared blankly at the cold dishes on the table. "You're still waiting for me. You didn't eat." Suli bit her lips and nodded aggrievedly. "Mother, you come back so late." "I'm starving." Zhang Yueru's eyes flashed with emotion, but it was soon covered by coldness. How could the path of immortality be tied down by love? She had found a way out. It was time to say goodbye to this child. Thinking of this, Zhang Yueru showed a gentle smile. She picked up Suli and walked to the room. "It's my fault. Let's have supper together. The last supper," she added in her heart. Seeing the little girl in her arms nodding cheerfully, her smile faded gradually. Damn lucky chance. She had wasted 5 years of her life. Damn it. Suli quickly heated up all the dishes and brought them to the table. The dishes were steaming hot. It smells so good. Zhang Yueruk squinted her eyes with a smile, full of praise. You won't suffer a loss if you have a full meal before you go on the road. Su Li heard her foster mother's praise and immediately grinned. She picked up a piece of duck blood for Zhang Yueru and said, "Mother, taste my cooking." "Okay, you also eat." The fragrance lingered in the room. It was a warm picture of a loving mother and a filial son. The smell of duck blood floated in the oil, salt, sauce, and vinegar. The servant hiding in the dark couldn't help but frown. Practitioners' five senses were magnified, and they hated food made of blood the most. They didn't know how the master endured for 5 years. Su Li held the bowl and took a bite of duck blood. Seeing that her foster mother had eaten the whole piece of duck blood, she couldn't help but smile more. "Girl, why are you giggling?" Zhang Yueru picked up some food for Su Li. She thought that she had a conscience among practitioners. If it were other practitioners, she would just kill them. She didn't care too much. Seeing that Zhang Yueru ate a lot of food, Su Li stopped smiling and sighed, "It would be nice if you were my real mother." Silly child. Zhang Yueru wanted to put down the bowl and chopsticks and touch Su Li's head. Suddenly, she frowned and her hands trembled. Crash! The bowl in her hand fell to the ground, making a crisp sound. In her blurred eyes, she saw Su Li was still smiling. "If you were my mother, I wouldn't have poisoned you. Bastard!" Zhang Yueruk screamed and turned into a pool of blood in the blink of an eye. Su Li sat at the table and tapped her fingers. Her voice was calm. "Okay." In the cold wind, the old man walked over with a complicated look. At this moment, he was sure that the little girl in front of him had no cultivation, but she talked like an old monster who had just possessed a little girl. Since Zhang Yueru was dead, of course, he wouldn't meddle. Instead, he looked more respectful. "Senior, the flying demon beast is ready. We can go to the transportation hub, Pingshan City immediately." "Well done." Su Li got up and walked to him. She pointed behind her, "Clean it up. I don't want anyone to know my whereabouts." The old man became more reverent. He waved his hand and several figures entered the room. Soon, there was a scream. "What about the people of the Jean family?" There was a touch of worry in the old man's eyes, but he still asked, "They are the first cultivation family in Fanglong City. It is not convenient for us to take action." Su Li was calm. She waved her sleeves and walked out of the courtyard. "Let's go. I don't have much time." The old man breathed a sigh of relief and quickly followed her. A moment later, Su Li sat on the flying demon beast and grasped the rope tightly. If she guessed right, whoosh! The flying demon beast spread its wings and flew into the sky. At the moment when it took Su Li away from Fanglong City, everything in front of it was broken, including the mount. Su Li was not flustered, because at this moment, she had already recovered all her cultivation and stood in the air. As long as she left Fanglong City, the illusion could be broken immediately. Her guess was right. She looked around, but all was pure white. There was no exit. "What are you looking for?" A blurry figure suddenly appeared. "Is this the exit?" Su Li's pupils shrank. She took a step back and bowed her head, "Senior Duan." If she guessed right, the person in front of her was the so-called Star Lord, Duan Hongqin. "I didn't want to come to see you. My action will make you noticed by many people." Duan Hongqin's words made Su Li puzzled, but she felt a sense of fear. The descendant of the undead clan and the supreme master of the human clan, you don't seem to know that your existence is very special. You symbolize that the life level of our human clan has been broken. But on the day you were born, you were stolen, and your whereabouts are unknown. Suli was confused. Was he talking about her? However, the information that I obtained in this world clearly stated that my existence was created by an evildoer by the name of White Demon. As soon as he said this, the blurred figure shook her head and chuckled. In this world, there is no existence that can create you. Even I can't, and I am already standing at the top of the universe. That BMO is the thief. Suli was shocked. She was almost distracted by the news brought by him. But why would a master of the universe lie to her? For tens of thousands of years, the undead clan and the human clan have not given up looking for you, but I didn't expect that you would be taken to such a remote corner. If you hadn't chosen Chuangxing path, I wouldn't have been able to find you. You seem to be different now. You are contaminated with the pneuma of the Dead Region clan, and you can use it perfectly. It even overpowers your bloodline of the undead clan. It's weird. Duan Hongchen didn't continue to say more. You seem to be in a bad situation. After seeing me, your situation will be worse. After dealing with this world, you should leave quickly and don't stay. Now, let me personally give you the reward for passing the illusion. The blurred figure flickered, and before Suli could react, it pointed at the center of her eyebrows. In an instant, the majestic and fierce information and energy wrapped her into a ball in the blink of an eye. At the same time, the blurred figure also collapsed and disappeared. After a few breaths, densely packed huge eyes suddenly appeared in the pure white space, as if they were looking for something. But because Suli was wrapped by the white silk threads, her existence was not seen. Soon, those eyes disappeared with a cold snort. Time passed in the tense situation. 2 months passed in the blink of an eye. On this day, the entire land of Qingshui's circle was covered by blood-red veins. Feng Huaji also opened his eyes at this moment, and his majestic voice spread through the entire Qingshui circle along the veins. Creatures of Qingshui circle, I am Feng Huaji, the old ancestor of Tianhe sect. Whether you are a practitioner or a mortal, at this moment, I need to let you know that Qingshui circle is at the moment of life and death. If this circle is controlled by White Demon, people will be plunged into misery and suffering. I have painstakingly thought of a way, but if I fight alone, the chance of winning is slim. At this moment, I need your help. Back then, I was the lord of the instrument hall of Qingshui Palace, and I had a unique skill in refining weapons. When Feng Huaji mentioned Qingshui Palace, the natural law immediately felt provoked. Countless thunderbolts suddenly fell, and the entire Tianhe sect was as bright as daytime. Bai Xiu closed his eyes, but he didn't hear the roar he expected. He opened his eyes slowly, and was shocked to see the thunderbolts turned into a dazzling lightning in Feng Huaji's hand. Chapter 669. Feng Huaji actually took away the thunder test. Was the Emperor's strength so horrible? Feng Huaji snorted coldly. He drew a round portal with his right hand and then threw the lightning in his hand into it. I dare not accept this gift. I give it back to you. As soon as he finished speaking, a round portal appeared above the Life Palace. The violent thunder fell, but it disappeared directly when it approached the Life Palace. Feng Huaji snorted coldly and didn't care much about it. The weapon I refined is under your feet. As long as you are willing to fight for Qingshui Circle, you can pick up the weapon. Mortals can kill those in Juji Realm. Those in Juji Realm can kill those in Jindan Realm. Similarly, if you pass the test for Junior Emperor, you can be besieged and killed. The spirituality in my blood net is the cornerstone for you to use the spiritual weapon. Feng Huaji's voice spread throughout Qingshui Circle. At this moment, all the creatures who had some understanding of the cultivation circle were extremely shocked. In the entire Qingshui Circle, mortals were the most common people. What a great undertaking it was to give every mortal the strength to fight with the cultivators. Even Bai Xiu couldn't help but be stunned and speechless for a long time when he heard Fang Huaji's plan. How can we allow others to sleep on the side of our bed? As long as you are willing to pick up the weapon, our power will be thousands or even tens of thousands of times that of White Demon. At this moment, all the creatures in every big region, whether mortals or practitioners, were overwhelmed with emotions. Their eyes gradually focused on the blood veins under their feet. Instead of panic, they were filled with the desire to fight that could set off stormy waves. Finally, an old grand elder of a sect took out an eccentric spiritual spear from the blood veins. At the moment when he touched the spear, he understood how to use it, and his turbid eyes lit up. I'm willing to go through fire and water for Qingshui Circle. All the 81 big regions in Qingshui Circle rose up at the same time. Countless practitioners rushed to the transmission matrix, and countless mortals dared to go with the practitioners. Crazy, crazy, everyone has gone crazy. Some people were unwilling to pick up the weapon, and their faces were full of panic. How can mortals be the opponents of practitioners? The old monster with this method is a lunatic. But no matter how he tried to persuade him, the young mortal, who was the only one who could see the hope of becoming extraordinary and was filled with fantasies, still entered the teleportation formation without looking back. Bai Xiu's face turned pale and his voice trembled. Many people will die like this. Mortals, cultivators, they will all die. Fang Huaji, you are not saving Qingshui Circle, but harming it. How can there be no deaths in war? Fang Huaji's face was expressionless as he looked away. A naive person like you is destined to fail. I am the real candidate to avenge the Green Water Palace. Bai Xiu was speechless and choked with sorrow. Even if it's hatred, it shouldn't hurt the innocent. Fang Huaji, you have truly turned into a devil. If you don't go crazy, you won't become a demon. Fang Huaji's gaze pierced through space and seemed to be able to see the teleportation array light up continuously. I've said it long ago. I only care about revenge. Everything else doesn't matter. In the Life Palace, the master of Xingtian Ancestral Temple and others were finally summoned by Bai Ming. You've all seen what the Tianhe sect has done. Bai Ming picked at his fingernails and raised his head with a hint of a smile. Interesting. Fang Huaji actually thought of such a method. Milord Fate Ancestor, how should we deal with it? Ling Kuan, the master of Xingtian Shrine, stepped forward and took the initiative to ask. Recently, he always felt that Bai Ming's attitude towards him was very strange, but he couldn't tell the specifics. Kill. Bai Ming's movements changed. He crossed his hands and glanced sharply at the three leaders of holy sects. This time, Wangxing Hall and Ankue Valley will be the assistants. Ling Kuan, you will be the commander-in-chief. The status of Xingtian Shrine should be like this. Ling Kuan's body shook, and his eyes lit up. He quickly knelt down. I dare not. I will follow your orders and fight with all my strength. Then go and assemble. Under Fang Huaji's instigation, you don't have much time to prepare. Yes. Chu Lianqing listened silently on the side, and his mind slowly sank. Bai Ming really wants to bury the entire Xingtian Shrine in the war, but what is his purpose? In just a few hours, more and more practitioners and mortals appeared in the sanctuary. The Tianhe sect had long been prepared and sent all elders to command the army. Each elder had the strength of nature's test. At this moment, they held a spiritual weapon with bloody meridians. They were like Junior Emperor, who was enough to lead a practitioner army. The war broke out as expected. Right in the center of Qingshui Circle, on the plain between the four holy sects, the sound of fighting filled the sky, and the blood flowed like a river. The war situation was still anxious at the beginning, but as more and more reinforcements came from various regions, and mortals used spiritual weapons that could attack practitioners in Juji realm remotely and kill them with one blow, the casualties of the army led by Xingtian Shrine increased greatly, and they gradually couldn't hold on. Ling Kun had a headache counting casualties every day. They couldn't get the spiritual weapon with bloody meridians, so their overall strength was lower. If it went on like this, they would be killed by the army of the Tianhe sect in less than a month. At that time, the army would come to the Life Palace, and he wouldn't be able to atone for his crime even if he died 10,000 times. Every practitioner of our Xingtian Shrine has walked out of a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. It's easy for one to fight against 10 people. Why are they so weak? This was what Ling Kun couldn't figure out the most. But he looked around and couldn't find anyone to investigate this matter. Ling Kun's eyes were gloomy. He looked at the bloody battlefield for a long time without saying a word. The flames of war burned for half a year. In the third month, Ankue Valley and Huangxing Hall all took part in the war with 17 holy sects. The poison of Chu Lianqing finally broke out at this moment, and the blood poison spread. Every time a person died in Xingtian Shrine, dozens or even more practitioners would be buried with him. The situation was reversed little by little. 27 holy sects finally couldn't hold back. Regardless of Bai Xiu's warning, they all joined the war. The Life Palace side was once again suppressed. The more turbulent war dyed the entire Qingshui circle red. Every day, countless creatures died. In the empty hall, Bai Ming looked at the picture in the small golden tower, and his smile gradually became arrogant. That's good. Feng Huaji, you are really my benefactor. Bai Ming laughed heartily, got up and tidied his clothes. Under the small golden tower, a hole was silently cracked open. He stepped down and walked for a long time. Finally, a huge fiery red boundary core came into view. Sensing the coming person, a ferocious face immediately appeared on the fiery red boundary core, and the scream full of hatred echoed in the space. Inferior race, you want to devour Jia clan. My clansmen will not let you go. Bai Ming looked at the face with joy. Do you see? The creatures you nurtured are killing each other and going to perish. Your natural law will also be in my hands. It will obediently destroy all the people who provoked this war. Speaking of this, Bai Ming clenched his palm, and the black ink poured into the boundary core from nothingness and slowly infiltrated it, making it difficult for the face to appear. White demon. You won't succeed, you won't. The boundary core barely maintained its form, and its voice was crazy. Have you forgotten? That anomaly that you brought, she's your nemesis. But you are afraid that I will get out of trouble, so you dare not leave here for a long time. This is your biggest weakness. Suli, her background is much more powerful than you think. You will fail, you will absolutely fail. Noisy. Bai Ming was expressionless and clenched his palm. The boundary core suddenly screamed, and the face collapsed. It seems that I am crazy to think that you will beg for mercy from me. It doesn't matter if you offer your life core. Bai Ming turned and left. When I destroy 90% of the foundation of this circle, you will collapse, and the Qimo circle will also be destroyed. I can harvest 2 boundary cores at a time, which is enough to make up for the loss. Time was ruthless. It passed in the flames of war. In the sorrow and tragedy, it was the 9th month of the war. One day in this month, Feng Mu's eyes were red. He raised his head numbly, but found that there was no one in front of him to kill. The army of the Life Palace had been killed. Did we win? He opened his mouth in a daze. Looking at the blood-red field, he choked with sobs. In this war, there was no winner. Too many people died. Many familiar elders of the Tianhe sect died in front of him. Even the grand elders of the 27 sects died because of the blood-poisonous human bombs thrown out by the Life Palace. At this moment, his thoughts started to wander. He had been wondering where the eldest brother was at this time. Reorganize the troops. Sorrow can't change anything. We have to destroy the Life Palace in one go. Fang Huaji's sonorous voice came. Now, listen to my command. Go to the Life Palace and win the battle. That's not necessary. A voice suddenly came from the sky. Fang Huaji, I'm kind. I'll let you die in your own sect, okay? A white figure appeared from the twisted space and stood not far in front of Fang Huaji. His face gradually became clear. Who else could it be but Bai Ming? Bai Xiu sighed and closed his eyes. Was the scene in the divination about to appear? The dialogue between the two sides spread throughout Qingshui's circle through the blood-red veins. At this moment, the rest of the practitioners immediately gathered in the Tianhe sect. White Demon, you finally stopped being a coward, huh? When Fang Huaji saw Bai Ming, his eyes were full of killing intent. Today is the day you die. Bai Ming tilted his head and looked at Fang Huaji with a smile. No, I show up today to thank you. Fang Huaji snorted coldly. Do you think that I will believe your nonsense? It doesn't matter whether you believe it or not. Bai Ming's expression was casual and happy. Now, your task is completed. You can die. Fang Huaji's eyes suddenly turned blood-red, and his robe turned into a shadow. Bai Ming didn't dodge and said softly. Destroy the world. Boom. Tens of thousands of pure black thunderbolts poured down without warning. In an instant, the mountain gate of the Tianhe sect, together with the mountain range, turned into flying ashes. Only the area where Bai Ming was located was protected by Fang Huaji. It only turned into ruins, but didn't turn into powder. Destroy the world thunder. Bai Xiu sat down on the side, watching the black thunderbolts falling. He was lost in thought. This was the second time he witnessed the destroy the world thunder. 9 months later, Bai Xiu's black hair had turned white, and the wrinkles on his face were like tree bark, full of ravines. Chapter 670. Remember in 1 second, 800 mail sign /say net. There was no pop-up window for free reading. Cough, cough, cough. Fang Huaji fell in the ruins, coughing up blood and laughing. It's really a thunder test that even the palace lord can't bear. It's reasonable for me to suffer the thunder of extermination for killing. But your thunder doesn't seem to be so good. It didn't kill me at once. Ha ha ha. Bai Ming raised his eyebrows and flicked his fingers. Suddenly, another thunder as thick as a bucket rushed down from the dark clouds, directly turning Fang Huaji's bones into ashes. The laughter stopped abruptly. Fang Huaji died. Bai Xiu didn't hesitate to stare at the bloody veins on the ground. They were still there. Bai Ming frowned slightly. This was indeed beyond his expectation. Except for the great emperor, who could support the operation of such a huge vein? Well, just destroy it. Bai Ming was about to destroy the center of the bloody vein. Suddenly, he stopped and took back his hand. He said expressionlessly, Ling Kuan, Chu Lianqing, Yin Lin, you come to clean up the mess. Don't hurt Bai Xiu. Take him into the Life Palace. After saying this, Bai Ming's figure flashed and disappeared. Bai Xiu sighed again. If Bai Ming chose to destroy the vein just now, he would definitely be swept by the killing intent of all the creatures in Qingshui's circle. Within a breath, he would die without leaving any remains. This was the last chance that Fang Huaji got at the cost of his own death. Unfortunately, Bai Mo was too cautious. Whoosh! 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 3 figures appeared on the ruins. Ling Kuan walked in the front and looked a little confused. The war of several months was ended by a blow from Fate Ancestor. But why did it happen after he killed all the disciples of the sect? Didn't you notice it until now? Baishio looked haggard and wrinkled his face with a smile. The purpose of Baimo is not to win, but to kill. As soon as he said this, the three people had different reactions. Ling Kuan's body shook violently. Chu Lianqing's eyes just changed, and Yin Lin had no reaction. Like you, I understand it too late. If you can explain it before Feng Huaji takes action. It's not too late. Suddenly, the fifth person's voice sounded in the field. Bai Xiao looked back in amazement and saw Feng Yuan standing in the center of the blood vein. He gently put his palm on the blood vein, and his breath soared again from the realm of Junior Emperor. Chu Lianqing, you still have the right to choose. As soon as these words were spoken, Chu Lianqing didn't say another word as his hands turned pitch black and slapped towards Yin Lin's head. This slap was an illusion. Yin Lin reappeared not far away, his brows tightly furrowed as he scolded in a low voice, Chu Lianqing, are you crazy? This sudden change dumbfounded Bai Xiao and Chu Lianqing. Chu Lianqing chuckled, thousand-faced demoness, even though I had already vaguely guessed your identity, I still didn't think of betraying you. Until Fate Ancestor asked me to poison Xingtian Shrine. This old man is very selfish. If one day my sect's disciples were to die like this, I wouldn't be able to bear it. Just because of this. Yin Lin shook his head and chuckled. His appearance changed to that of an old woman. Fool. When Feng Yuan saw the appearance of the old woman, his pupils shrank slightly. Thousand-faced demoness turned out to be the old lady of the Ling Mansion in the reincarnation mirror, Gu Yan. He faintly felt that something was wrong, but his eyes were still firm. He waved his sleeves to set a blood cage in this world, and said in a deep voice, thousand-faced demoness, no matter who you are, no one can save you today. The old woman snorted coldly and turned into a phantom, trying to break through the cage, but was directly bounced back by the cage. She turned into Suli again and said with a timid face, Great Emperor, did you become the Great Emperor by relying on the legacy of Feng Huaji? I'm so scared. Feng Yuan's eyes were full of anger. When he waved his sleeves, countless bloody brilliance penetrated the old woman's body. Don't become like her, disgusting. This time, the old woman still turned into a phantom and ran away, leaving a little blood on the ground. When she appeared again, she was beside Ling Kuan, covering her mouth and nose, which were overflowing with blood. Ahem, I thought you wouldn't have the heart to do it. You are not her. Then do you know that she is still alive? Feng Yuan's eyes moved, and he raised his hand expressionlessly. Countless bloody brilliance quickly descended and shrouded Ling Kuan. You talk too much nonsense. Thousand-faced demoness was very angry. Why didn't Bai Ming show up? Thousand-faced demoness, you said that Ling Kuan was naive, but aren't you one of them? If White Demon wants to achieve his goal, we, who occupy the foundation of Qingshui's circle, have to die. Thousand-faced demoness' eyes were full of black lines, and her speed immediately increased to the same level as Feng Yuan. Her voice also became more hoarse, like a night crow. Ha 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 ha, you are wrong about this. I am not from Qingshui's circle at all. White Demon has no reason to kill me. Bai Xiao was stunned and immediately shook his head. He doesn't show up, which is the best proof. You have been with him for tens of thousands of years, and you know too much. No. Thousand-faced demoness' ferocious face was covered with fine fluff, and a second pair of hands grew from her back. He is my cultivation companion, and he loves me. How could he hurt me? Bai Xiao looked at the horrible appearance of thousand-faced demoness and was silent for a moment. Then he laughed. It turns out that you are more naive than I thought. I will kill you. Crack. Crack. Thousand-faced Demoness had 6 pairs of limbs on her back, and 3 pairs of eyes appeared on her face. Her speed soared to the extreme, but when her tentacles penetrated by Xiao, they were caught by Fang Yuan and pulled hard. Ah! Thousand-faced Demoness screamed and retreated with resentment in her eyes. She came from the starry sky as a thousand-faced spider demon. She was born to change and imitate anyone's breath. But her cultivation talent was very poor. Even if she had lived for tens of thousands of years, she could not break through Junior Emperor and step into the realm of Deshang completion. Until she met White Demon, who gave her hope. But now, Bai Xiu actually said that she was cheated. Ha 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 ha, Thousand-faced Demoness endured the severe pain, and a twisted smile appeared on her face. Her hands suddenly crossed to make a strange gesture. Your great emperor just used the means left by Fang Huaji. Do you really think you can easily kill me? Blood-killing curse. As soon as she finished speaking, Ling Kuan's body suddenly soared, and his breath soared. In a few breaths, he broke through to Great Emperor. He roared and rushed to the center of the bloody meridian. No, he is going to destroy the meridian. Bai Xiu reluctantly reminded. Fang Yuan's face darkened. He ignored Thousand-faced Demoness and blocked Ling Kuan, who was demonized by the curse. The two fell into a fierce battle. Thousand-faced Demoness gasped and finally no longer hoped that White Demon would appear. She quickly set up the altar, flipped her hands, and kept making gestures. Bai Xiu looked at her movements and shouted coldly, "At this point, you still want to help him achieve his goal? Don't be stubborn and harm others and yourself." Ha 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 ha, Bai Xiu. How do you know that what I am doing now is to help him, not to save myself? I will explain to him face to face. It is not your turn to sow discord. The situation in front of us is actually very easy to solve. As early as a long time ago, we have made preparations. Thousand-faced Demoness waved her sleeves, and a pocket-sized mountain appeared out of thin air on the altar. Bai Xiu looked carefully and found it was a pocket-sized version of Xingxian Mountain. He immediately thought of something, and his eyes were full of horror. Tianjiao list. Ha 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 ha, go to hell. Thousand-faced Demoness laughed wildly and smashed Xingxian Mountain into pieces with one palm. At this moment, blood flowed from the corner of her mouth, and she suffered from the backfire. Fang Yuan, who was fighting fiercely with Ling Kuan, suddenly changed his face. He retreated far away and supported his body with a sword. His blood gurgled down along the flying sword. He was not injured, but his blood was flowing rapidly. His soul seemed to be suddenly missing a piece. The sinful breath of the blood-colored meridian found an outlet to pour out, which made his strength decline rapidly. Ah! Fang Yuan screamed unwillingly and rushed to Thousand-faced Demoness with blood-red eyes. But he was slapped away by Ling Kuan. His body was torn apart, and blood splashed in the sky. The blood-colored cage crashed and broke. Fang Mu's eyes were blood-red. He looked at his hands full of blood, and then looked at the realizations around him. He was in a daze, and his sight was blurred. The world was spinning. What's wrong? With a plop, Fang Mu fell to the ground and could not get up again. Like him, all the talents who had participated in the Tianjiao battle over the past tens of thousands of years had the same reaction. They either bled from the 7 apertures of their heads or died suddenly. Or their souls perished, and their bodies collapsed. The foundation of Qingshui's circle disappeared at a faster speed than during the war. Well done, Gu Yan. Bai Ming calmly looked down at the Heavenly River sex battle, still smiling. Beside him, there was a page of old paper that had been torn off. It was recorded that the price of casting this curse was that the caster would be dragged into the hell of 9 tribulations and would be tortured forever. He would be the only winner, and he didn't need anyone to share the fruits of victory with him. At this moment, the picture in the golden tower suddenly changed, and even his expression suddenly changed. Feng Yuan's inverted body was suddenly caught by a pair of hands. Gu Yan, who was about to escape after casting the spell, suddenly found that there was a transparent cage outside the blood-colored cage. She finally smelled the fear before death. She looked for the curse and stared at the figure of the person. When she was about to cast the spell, she found that her hands suddenly broke and fell to the ground. This scene made her fall into a deep confusion, and she even forgot to cast the spell. You are here. Bai Xiu looked at the person with relief. It seems that you have completely integrated the bloodline and become a real emperor. The curse of the thousand-faced demon girl can't affect you. Ling Li looked serious and silently put Feng Yuan, who was seriously injured and dying, into the reincarnation mirror. There, he could at least die slowly like others. I'm late. Ling Li's sigh was like crushed sand, melting in the wind and turning into sharp swords, penetrating Ling Kuan, who was roaring and nailing him to the ground. Because of the change of the thousand-faced demon girl, the curse on him gradually disappeared, revealing his original appearance. I remember you. Ling Li walked up to him, who was dying. You are in my memory. You are from the Ling family, an affiliated family of the Qingshui Palace. My mother does come from your family, but she has no blood relationship with you. Did Bai Ming rely on this relationship to let you inherit the fate of the Qingshui Palace? Ling Kuan's mouth was bleeding, and his eyes were full of hatred. If your father was fair to the Ling family, how could the Ling family turn to the Life Palace? My father died in the hands of your father. You and I are of the same generation. Ling Kuan, Ling Li's tone was indifferent. I don't have the memory of that year. But my father's memory tells me that if your Ling family did not rebel, you would be the lord of this realm. Ling Kuan fell into a sluggish state, and then his whole body trembled. You liar, how is it possible? My father's ambition is not in this realm, because my mother is missing. Ling Li seemed to be telling something that had nothing to do with him, and there was pity in his eyes. So, it is you who destroyed your own world. Ling Kuan vomited the bright red visceral blood, widened his eyes, and gradually stopped breathing. I hate. Chapter 671. Remember in 1 second, 800 mail sign small/say net wonderful pop-up window free reading. Chu Lianqing looked at this scene in silence. He was also one of the accomplices. At this moment, he was at a loss except for silence. Ling Li added a protection to Bai Xiu and flashed to the demon girl who had almost melted into a pile of flesh and blood. He said calmly, you have been cheated. The face in the flesh and blood showed a relieved expression. I have committed countless sins in my life, and I deserve to die. It's a pity that I can't die with him. What a pity. I will send him down to accompany you. Ling Li looked up at the dispersing dark clouds. He was born in Qingshui Circle and had never slaughtered mortals. The fighting between practitioners could not cause the natural law to send the thunder of doom. In other words, Bai Mo could do nothing to him. Be careful, he must have a backup plan. The face in the flesh and blood gradually couldn't maintain, and the voice was intermittent. Su Li was not created by him, and he is not qualified. Ling Li's eyes were fixed, and then his eyebrows stretched. He nodded slightly to the flesh and blood that had lost the face. Thank you. It's really surprising that you have absorbed your father's bloodline in just 1 year and become a great emperor. At this time, the voice of Bai Ming sounded between heaven and earth. A white figure flashed out and stood in the air, looking down at Ling Li. Ling Li's eyes suddenly became cold. He waved his sleeves and flew to the same height as Bai Xiu. They looked at each other from a distance. Bai Xiu supported his body and looked at the white figures on both sides. He realized that this was the final picture he had foreseen. It turned out that it was not Feng Huaji who fought with Bai Mo, but Ling Li. But what he saw was clearly a failure. Even Ling Li, who became a great emperor, was not a match for Bai Mo. What about Su Jouzhou? Where was Su Jouzhou at this moment? In the nothingness, Ling Li stared at Bai Mo coldly. After a moment of confrontation, his figure suddenly disappeared, and a shocking sword strike suddenly came. Bai Mo's eyes were full of sarcasm. He said softly with a casual posture, "The natural law blesses me." The huge golden sword's shadow chopped 3 inches away from his head, as if it encountered an absolute barrier. Under the shock, it burst directly. "You!" Ling Li's pupils suddenly shrank. Before he spoke, he saw Bai Mo smiling at him and spitting out 2 words that were engraved in the depths of his soul. "Destroy the world." Boom! Under the clear sky, the black thunder snake didn't need to be prepared, and it went straight into the void. Ling Li, who was black all over, staggered out, and his face showed unprecedented horror. Surprised. "You have a lot of questions. Why can I send down the apocalyptic thunder tribulation on you?" White Demon's body turned and rose higher into the sky. Black lightning spun around him like the most obedient pet. He squinted his eyes and smiled. Gradually, it turned into a loud laugh, a wild laugh. "You guys are right about one thing. We came too late. It's all thanks to Feng Huaji. If it weren't for his leadership, the creatures in Qingshui's circle would die in large numbers, and I wouldn't be able to tilt the authority of the natural law. At this moment, the natural law doesn't need any rule, because I am its rule." As Bai Mo said, he leisurely struck Ling Li with lightning as thick as a bucket, which directly smashed Ling Li's flesh and blood. If it weren't for the fact that his bloodline was far more powerful than Feng Huaji's, he would have been annihilated at the moment. Even so, he would die directly like Feng Huaji if he held on for a while. Now his soul was in chaos, and he could no longer concentrate on thinking about the way to save himself. Ding! When his soul was in chaos, a crisp sound suddenly came through his ears. His eyes became clear and he saw the reincarnation mirror falling into the stone crack. The black lotus hanging on the handle of the mirror hit the stone and made a crisp sound. Wang, and everyone, he moved his twitching body painfully and stubbornly. Regardless of the baptism of the black lightning snakes, he grasped the reincarnation mirror in his hand. The reincarnation mirror emitted a bright light and barely protected Ling Li in it. But under the impact of the black lightning snakes, the mirror soon cracked. Ling Li forcibly got rid of the distracting thoughts and operated a forbidden skill in his father's memory with difficulty. As soon as he made a gesture with his hands, he groaned miserably. It seemed that he was being dismembered. His flesh and blood were all disintegrated and poured into the nothingness. At the same time, an illusory portal appeared in front of him. Seeing this, Bai Mo was shocked and wanted to snatch the reincarnation mirror in Ling Li's hand. But he was directly shaken back by the power of the portal in the void, and his face was faintly pale. "I guessed right. Apart from the natural law, you are a weakling. Any great emperor can pinch you to death." Bai Xiu laughed out loud. "In the reincarnation mirror, there is the foundation of Qingshui's circle that you want. It is absolutely more than 10%. If they escape far away, the effect of the spell will disappear. Your plan to seize the realm core will be declared a failure. Old thing, you know a lot." Bai Mo's expression was unprecedentedly fierce. He turned his head to look at Chu Lianqing, who was still standing on one side. "You go, by any means, take the reincarnation mirror in his hand. Otherwise, you're on Kue Valley." Before Bai Mo finished his words, he was interrupted by Chu Lianqing with a smile. "My Ankue Valley has a successor in the reincarnation mirror. Even if you kill everyone in the valley, I will not stop you, and, Chu Lianqing's palms turned dark and suddenly rushed to Bai Mo, I still want to stop you. Bai Mo frowned and drove the annihilation thunder to smash Chu Lianqing into flying ashes, but it also inevitably gave Ling Li a chance to breathe. The speed of his gestures suddenly accelerated, and the bones of his whole body also turned into powder and flew into the door. It was only a weak soul that kept him casting the spell. In exchange for the physical body of the great emperor, the door of the void quickly solidified. In just a breath, it was completely solidified. The door opened wide, and the mysterious Numa came through the void. Seeing this scene, Ling Li showed such a relieved smile, and used the last strength to throw the reincarnation mirror into the door. Dad! 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 No! Dad, I'm calling you! Dad! The space in the reincarnation mirror was full of dark red blood. Because of the curse of the Tianjiao list, no one was spared. Even through a mirror, they just died a little slower. In this space, the only one who could see the outside world was Su Buwang. He saw the tragedy of the outside world and Ling Li destroying his physical body. His body trembled violently. How could he still be reserved? He shouted crazily in the space, over and over again. Unfortunately, the reincarnation mirror was too weak to transmit his voice to Ling Li's ears. Boom! The door was closed. Bai Mo's face was as black as ink. He stared at Ling Li, whose soul was about to dissipate. The high-pitched voice full of blood and hatred spread throughout Qingshui's circle. Damn you! Ling Li's thoughts gradually dispersed, and his gradually cold soul could no longer respond to the anger of Bai Mo. After this battle, if Bai Mo wanted to achieve his goal, he had to at least wait for Qingshui's circle to recover. Unfortunately, he failed to defeat him in the end. In the end, he didn't wait for her. No, you waited for her. The cold soul was suddenly wrapped in warmth. Ling Li opened his eyes in astonishment and saw a pair of eyes as gentle as water. The tenderness in them was so strong that it couldn't be melted. His mind trembled, but he found that he could no longer call the name with all his strength. Su Li shook her head gently, hugged his soul, and kissed his transparent lips gently. A deep kiss. The soul dissipated and turned into light spots. But when Su Li reached out and grabbed, it condensed into a light ball. She threw it into the door that had not been completely closed. After doing all this, Su Li's expression returned to indifference. She looked up at Bai Mo, who was no longer calm. The coldness in her calm eyes almost froze Bai Mo. It's time to send you to the place where you should go. Bai Mo's crazy thoughts were completely awakened by the fear and trembling. He didn't understand. It had only been a few months, but the woman in front of him gave him the feeling that she was a completely different person from the time he met in Xian House. No, if Su Li was like his kind before, now Su Li seemed to be a higher level of life than him. It made him feel that no matter what he did, the result would be in vain. Ha! Bai Mo kept smiling. Do you think you can fool me with a few words? Destroy the world. The black thunder was like black ink, drowning the whole world and washing out an abyss of only tens of thousands of miles. Bai Mo sensed that Su Li's breath disappeared. He was about to laugh, but he saw Su Li holding Bai Xiu and walking out calmly in the thunder. Su Bai, she said softly, and then saw a young man shining with 5-color brilliance walk out from behind her. He stretched out his hand, and a 5-color cage fell from the sky, imprisoning Bai Mo in it. Shrouded by the light of the thunder of tranquility, Bai Mo immediately screamed. His flesh and blood fell off, which was extremely miserable. Sister, he is very weak. I almost killed him. Su Bai was scared. If such a bad guy died easily, his sister would be angry. Su Li listened to Bai Mo's scream, which seemed to be the most pleasant sound in the world. She smiled, but saw Bai Ming in the cage suddenly twitch, kneeling on the ground and shouting anxiously, "Eldest brother. It's me. Let me out. Bai Mo's soul has been purified. I'm out. Ask her to stop. If she continues, I will die." Bai Xiu's old body trembled. Seeing Bai Ming's clear eyes, the corners of his mouth immediately began to tremble. "Suli, look." Suli was expressionless. Without saying anything, she waved her hand to disperse the cage. Bai Ming was immediately saved. He walked to Suli with fear and knelt down. "Thank you for saving my life, Senior. Otherwise, it would be difficult for me to escape from the clutches of the devil in my lifetime." "Brother, it's really you." Bai Xiu burst into tears and was about to step forward. Bai Ming also approached with an excited expression, but just as he was about to touch Bai Xiu, a strange smile appeared on his face, and his body exploded. "Ha ha ha ha." Wild laughter pierced through the dark clouds. "My dear brother, you are so gullible. I have to thank you for saving my life. And Suli, although I failed this time, it doesn't mean that I can't make a comeback. Do you think I will really believe your nonsense?" Suli interrupted his nonsense, and her eyes were cold. "I just want to confirm whether you will have a second shelter." So, Suli's eyes flashed, and her figure suddenly disappeared. She appeared in the hall of the Life Palace and went straight to the small golden tower. Bai Mo was shocked and angry, and immediately sent down the devastating thunder. Suli's lips curled up. She only wrapped herself in colorful light, and let the Life Palace turn into an abyss under the black thunder. Crack! The sound of breaking rang in Suli and Bai Mo's ears, like a song of death, which made Bai Mo, who had incarnated the natural law, fall into extreme panic. He was bewitched by Suli just now. She actually bombarded the boundary core with the natural law, and the seal of the boundary core was broken. Suli actually knew the existence of the boundary core. He was not as simple as the original body said, and the original body regarded him as a sacrificial pawn. Why? At this moment, Bai Mo figured everything out. But soon he had no idea. He, who devoted himself to the natural law, was like a turtle in a jar. The boundary core, which was full of hatred for him, could annihilate him in an instant. Undead clan. The voice of the boundary core came into Suli's mind. "I already know about my sister's situation. Although you are the natural enemy of our clan, it does not prevent us from showing respect to you." Suli nodded gently. Looking at the abyss disappearing under the influence of the boundary core and the gradually recovering nimbus, she said softly, "I will leave this circle soon. You don't have to worry. Thank you for your understanding. Your existence really makes me afraid." The voice of the boundary core faded away and no longer disturbed Suli. Suli turned around and fell from the nothingness. She came to Bai Xiu's side with a faint smile and a gentle tone. "How do you feel?" "I am really going to die this time." Bai Xiu chuckled. This old man was muddle-headed again, and almost made a big mistake. Too many people had died in this battle. "I can't understand your realm. Even if you can save me, I don't want to. I should go down to atone for my sins." Suli listened quietly to Bai Xiu's last words without saying a word. "Before the thousand-faced demon girl died, she said that your life was not created by Bai Mo, and he was not qualified. You can go outside Qingshui's circle to find your origin." "I will." Suli had a response this time. Bai Xiu smiled with tears and closed his eyes with relief. "Next, do what you want to do." After saying this, the breath of the old man disappeared. His soul scattered into light spots and went into reincarnation. Suli buried Bai Xiu on the spot and stood still for a moment. Suddenly her figure turned into a mysterious light and disappeared in Qingshui Circle. At the door of a high-end restaurant in Jianghai City, Ling Li wore a suit and opened the door helplessly. When the waiter saw his face, his eyes immediately brightened. He approached and asked, "Sir, do you have an appointment?" "Yes." Ling Li pulled his tie uncomfortably and took out his mobile phone from his pocket. He looked up and said, "Number 086. Sir, please come with me." Ling Li stepped forward with a headache. Today was the 31st day since he returned to the Cerulean Star and the second day since he was released from the mental hospital. All this came from the fact that his mother didn't believe that he had a wife and a grown-up son. Tens of thousands of years in Qingshui Circle, but 2 years have passed here. Is it because of Einstein's theory of relativity? Ling Li thought about it and had a headache. In order to cure his illusion, his mother immediately began to arrange a blind date after he was discharged from the hospital. In order not to be sent to the mental hospital, he had to bite the bullet and come here. He could only secretly hope that his performance was bad enough to directly ruin the blind date. With this idea, Ling Li sat down under the guidance of the waiter. When he looked up, his helpless look turned into astonishment and dullness. The woman sitting opposite shook the wine glass in her hand and chuckled as before. "What? Your son is almost 1,100 years old. You still come to a blind date?" The red wine in the woman's hand suddenly turned black, and her tone was full of teasing. "It took me a long time to find you. Otherwise, I will poison you to death." With tears in his eyes, Ling Li smiled embarrassedly. "It's all up to you. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.